Chapter 670. After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, the scene fell into a suffocating silence. Cheng Cheng had to admit a fact. He was moved. Jiang Pengji's words hit Cheng Cheng's weak spot and pinched his lifeline. Even if he was born into an aristocratic family, he could not refute every word she said. It was like the golden words of a saint, and the future would prove that what she said was true. It was a prophecy. How could mortals refute it? When the audience in the streaming room suspected that Cheng Cheng and Jiang Pengji had pressed the pause button, Cheng Cheng asked her in a hoarse voice. "Aren't you afraid of being smashed to pieces?" Jiang Pengji smiled. "What's the big deal about being smashed to pieces? Even if I'm nailed to the pillar of shame in history, no one can stop me from doing what I want to do. Life is only 100 years. I don't want to regret it when I'm old. Whether I'm famous in history or infamous for thousands of years, it's impossible for people to live without desires. It's just fame and fortune. For ordinary people, after 2 or 3 generations, even the descendants would forget the name of their ancestors. But if I live in history, no matter who mentions my name, they must remember that there was such a person. She had reached the peak in her previous life. How could she be willing to be ordinary and unknown in this life? If she wanted to make trouble, she would make it bigger. Not only did she want to influence the present for decades, but she also wanted to change the history of the next hundreds or thousands of years because of her. Unify the 9 states and ascend the throne? That was not enough. Cheng Cheng could not help but smile bitterly. Young people, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. He had thought that Lu Shi lived in Lu Shi's shadow and followed in his footsteps. Now it seemed that she had long reached a realm of thinking that was difficult for all people to reach. Arrogant, there was only one person who dared to use his life to stir up the storm of the times. Jiang Pengji said calmly, "The future will prove that I'm right. Whether it's 10 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years, I can wait." Cheng Cheng was surprised. He knew the real meaning of Jiang Pengji's words. She did not mean that she could live for so long, but she believed that she was right. No matter how far in the future generations would prove that she was right. How confident was she? Forget it. Cheng Cheng calmed down and realized that his hands were still shaking, and his breathing was disordered as if he had run a long way. His undershirt was already soaked in sweat. "I'm old, and I don't have the energy to play with young people." Cheng Cheng hadn't been convinced by Jiang Pengji. The audience in the streaming room couldn't help but complain in the bullet screen. The anchor's hot-blooded and Chinibyu words just now made them feel hot all over and their blood was boiling. Why was Cheng Cheng still indifferent? Scheming Yang Sisi, the host's ever-successful trick has finally hit a wall. Everyone should celebrate. Loyal and honest Yi Buxiu, TSK, young man, you're wrong. I'll bet a pack of cigarettes on the streamer. Lo Ciji Lianmeng, hey, can you change your IDs? You can't be so ruthless, right? Heart-piercing. Eloquent Zhou Zikai, keep up with the times, keep up with the trends, and never change. Hand speed expert Yu Wenzhou, #tender smile, I've already changed. Gui Kai Guofengxiu, to the one above, you should change back to your original ID. This time, your ID is even more ruthless. Jiang Pengji didn't understand their jokes, but looking at the bullet screen, she could mostly guess that these IDs were the products of natural ruthlessness. Host V, loyal and honest Yi Buxiu, you've guessed correctly. As soon as she sent this bullet screen, Cheng Cheng, who seemed to have rejected her, spoke again. Even a young man like you isn't afraid. Why should an old man like me, who has one foot in the grave, be afraid? Other than true scholars, others couldn't understand how attractive Jiang Pengji's blueprint was to Cheng Cheng. A warrior would die for a bosom friend. Without a doubt, the teenager in front of him was the bosom friend that Cheng Cheng had been searching for half his life. Cheng Cheng said with a complicated expression, I only hope that you don't disappoint your original intentions and don't forget what you said today. The road from humble to supreme was too long, and there were too many temptations. Cheng Cheng didn't know if the future Jiang Pengji would still not disappoint her original intentions when she looked back. Could this teenager withstand all kinds of temptations? From the beginning to the end, would he not change his original intentions? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "Of course." Of course she wouldn't change, because for Jiang Pengji, that was faith. From meeting Cheng Cheng to successfully persuading him, Jiang Pengji spent more than an hour. Her achievements were still brilliant. When Su Ku heard the news, he couldn't help but tease her. "My lord, you're successful in every endeavor." Qiguan Rang secretly rolled his eyes. He didn't think it was something to boast about. Jiang Pengji threw something to Su Ku and said lazily, "Don't be happy too early, my big accountant." The bamboo slip floated into Su Ku's arms. He looked a little confused. A newcomer had joined the overtime team. Why couldn't he be happy? Su Ku curiously untied the bow on the bamboo slip. When he unfolded it to take a look, his expression almost cracked into pieces. "My lord," Qiguan Rang heard a trace of grief and indignation in Su Ku's voice. He couldn't help but step forward curiously. He stuck his head out to take a look. "What is this?" he looked at it as he asked. Soon, he saw it from beginning to end. He silently lit a row of candles for Su Ku in his heart. "A proposal," Jiang Pengji said. "I want to hire Mr. Cheng to oversee the overall situation. Whether it's opening an academy or a library, books are the most important. I've divided the newly designed printing technique into two types. One is movable type and the other is engraving. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Movable type is more convenient and flexible, while engraving is exquisite and clear. As for which one to choose, it's up to Mr. Cheng's decision." Su Ku pulled a long face. He thought that Cheng Cheng came over to share the burden with him. In the end, he threw him a heavy task that was as heavy as a mountain. Whether it was the movable type that Jiang Pengji had mentioned before or the engraving that she was now dictating, which one of them wasn't a project that burned money? Once this aspect was involved, in the end, it would all be piled on him. After all, he was the housekeeper. Su Ku was quite sensitive to numbers. After calculating the cost, he couldn't help but be speechless. Jiang Pengji saw the pain on his face. She said calmly and firmly, "I know that it will cost a lot of money, but this plan is the same as the post-war pension. Even if I have to sacrifice everything I have, I will complete it. Regardless of the cost, I will fully support Mr. Cheng." No one knew better than her how much economic benefits and political influence the popularization of books would bring to society. It could even change the social structure and tear apart the last fig leaf of the gentry. Even if it caused a reign of terror and thousands of lives were sacrificed, she would still do it. Contributions to the present generation would benefit the future generations. In her opinion, anything that could push the entire society forward was worth a try. Even if she, as a pioneer, had to pay the price with her life, she would take it. Su Ku's expression was solemn. He replied in a clear voice, "Yes, sir." Jiang Pengji rubbed her eyebrows. Ever since she received the news from Cheng Cheng, she had rushed back with all her might. She hadn't rested until now. "I'll go rest for a while." Jiang Pengji lowered her eyes and was about to leave and the messenger came in to report. Cheng Yuan had come to visit. Chapter 671. Cheng Cheng had 2 sons and a daughter. Cheng Yuan was the second legitimate son of Cheng Cheng and his wife. Cheng Yuan's courtesy name was Gong Liao. What is he doing here? Jiang Pengji frowned imperceptibly. Could it be that this second Lang Jun thought that she had cheated his old father, Cheng Cheng, and was rushing to settle the score with her? Thinking of this, she smiled dumbly. Xiaoyu, go and test the other party's intentions first, Su Ku smiled bitterly. He could only bite the bullet and do it. As for why Jiang Pengji didn't show up, Su Ku had also found a ready-made excuse. His lord had rushed all the way back for Cheng Cheng. She was extremely tired and had fallen asleep as soon as she returned. The servants couldn't disturb her sleep, so he could only come forward to receive Cheng Yuan. It was a perfect excuse. Not only could it save face for both sides, but it could also perfectly explain his lord's laziness and avoidance. It would also flatter Cheng Cheng at the same time. Cheng Yuan had just passed his 20s. His face still looked a little tender and youthful, but the aura around him was quite peaceful. There was a kind of steadiness and calmness that didn't match his age. Su Ku could be considered experienced and knowledgeable. Just by looking at Cheng Yuan's bearing, he felt that he was a loyal and sincere person. After a further conversation, Su Ku was even more certain of his guess. Not only was Cheng Yuan not looking for Jiang Pengji to settle the score with her, but he was also there to recommend himself. Yes, he was not wrong. He was indeed recommending himself. Buy one get one free. He had abducted the old one, Cheng Cheng, and he had also gotten a young one, Cheng Yuan. My lord, look at how much sin you have committed. Knowing this, Su Ku couldn't help but be secretly speechless. Young man, isn't it good to be alive? Do you know the consequences of recommending yourself? The Wanzhou Overtime team welcomes you. You work overtime every day, all year round. The benefits are deceptive, and the leaders are unreliable. If the Lord's brain was damaged one day, the workload would increase several times. Of course, Su Ku couldn't tell the truth. If he scared him away, his lord and other colleagues would fight him to the death. Cheng Yuan really didn't know the internal situation of Wanzhou, but he knew how heavy the burden his father had taken on was. If he was not careful, he would go down in history. As a child, how could Cheng Yuan bear to let his middle-aged father bear such a huge burden and risk? As the son of Cheng Cheng, he was one of the people who knew Cheng Cheng best. He could understand his father's pursuit and ideals. Therefore, Cheng Yuan did not stop him. Instead, he felt happy for his father. While he was happy, he was also deeply worried. That was why he recommended himself and took the initiative to seek shelter. Jiang Pengji smiled when she heard what Su Ku said. What an obedient and sensible filial son. You've met Cheng Yuan, what do you think of him? Su Ku deliberated seriously and recalled the conversation with Cheng Yuan just now. Cheng Gongliao is steady and careful. He has a pragmatic personality. He's a good candidate. As for how strong he was, it was hard to say. He would secretly test him later. I think Mr. Cheng's son won't be too bad. How could there be any reason to reject a labor force that was voluntarily delivered to the door? Because of the rapid expansion of power, the military strength and development could not keep up with the pace. This caused the foundation to be shaken, which became Jiang Pengji's current hidden worry. What she needed the most right now was someone like Cheng Yuan. He was calm and meticulous, and would not rashly stir up trouble. Even if they didn't have amazing talents, as long as they worked hard and steadily, they would still become the mainstay of Wanzhou's power. In that case, I'll leave Cheng Gongliao to you for the time being. Jiang Pengji's voice was hoarse. The rescue of the emperor is imminent. I'll transfer 10,000 troops and take a few people with me. The official duties in Wanzhou will be heavy. Teach Cheng Gongliao first. When he gets used to it, you can throw things to him. Jiang Pengji was already short of people. If she took away part of her family's assets to rescue the emperor, the base camp in Wanzhou would be even more short of people. At that moment, bumping into Cheng Cheng and his son was like having a pillow when she was dozing off. Even Jiang Pengji couldn't help but applaud her luck. That's good. I guess I'll be a little more free. Su Ku smiled and teased. He wasn't the slightest bit unhappy about a newcomer stealing his job. In fact, he was happy to see it happen. It wasn't that Su Ku was careless, but Jiang Pengji had set a good example for everyone. She wouldn't bury anyone's talent. Although she was biased in private, she was very fair in official matters, and people were convinced. Su Ku didn't have to worry about Cheng Yuan threatening his position because there was no conflict of interest between the two. If promoting Cheng Yuan could reduce his pressure and increase Wanzhou's strength, Su Ku would do it even without Jiang Pengji's instructions. Yes, I've always been at ease when Xiaoyu does things. With Su Ku's help, she really didn't have to worry. Look at other people's forces. There would always be some kind of friction within the group. The atmosphere was not harmonious, and they held each other back. To give a ready-made example, Yang Xi's old boss, Prince Changshu, was a typical example. On the surface, the internal situation was harmonious, but in private, the undercurrents were surging. You tripped me up, and I'll do the same to you. It was like a plot from the palace. They mocked and ridiculed each other, pointing at the mulberry tree and scolding the locust tree. They fought fiercely. Even on Jiang Pengji's side, they weren't considered a family. In fact, there were some discordant factors. For example, Feng Zhen, who was a wanton and unrestrained man, didn't have a good relationship with Feng Jin, Su Ku, and the others. Even so, they wouldn't shift these conflicts to official matters. First of all, they had brains and wouldn't let their personal interests get in the way of public affairs. They also supervised and restrained each other. Second, Jiang Pengji wouldn't allow them to do so. She wouldn't interfere with their private relationships. But if anyone were to make trouble in official matters, did they think she was dead? She would throw everyone into suitable positions to shine and make use of their labor force to her heart's content. She wouldn't let any talent go to waste. Jiang Pengji's consistent creed was to do as much as one had the ability. She wouldn't send those who had high standards but little ability off. Jiang Pengji hadn't made an accurate judgment on Cheng Yuan's position, so she let him practice for a while before deciding. When Cheng Yuan returned home, Cheng only knew what his son had done behind his back. "Son, you sold yourself just like that?" Cheng frowned. "Do you know why I've stopped you from becoming an official several times?" He didn't like official strife, but it didn't mean that he liked to control his son's life. The reason why he didn't approve of Cheng Yuan becoming an official was because Cheng thought that his youngest son wasn't mature enough and wasn't capable enough. It wasn't easy for a person who wasn't capable to stand out, even if he came from a good family. Cheng Yuan felt guilty. He lowered his head and fiddled with his sleeves, not saying a word. Cheng shook his head. "Forget it. What's done can't be undone. Since Lu Lanting, the Lord has accepted you, don't embarrass the Cheng family." Cheng Yuan lowered his head and said, "Please guide me, father. Do more, talk less, don't be stubborn, ask for advice seriously, and learn with an open mind. Don't be fooled by the people around the Lord. They're only 3 to 5 years older than you, but they're all dragons and phoenixes among men. There are benefits to being born into a humble background. At least their temperaments are more mature and stable than their peers." Cheng thought of Su Ku. Su Ku had been Jiang Pengji's right-hand man for many years. "Do you understand?" Cheng Yuan nodded obediently. Cheng was satisfied. His youngest son had a good temperament. He wasn't as unruly as his eldest son. Chapter 672. It turned out that Cheng Yuan was gentle and honest. He was indeed an obedient and sensible child. At first, Su Ku was a little worried. What was there to worry about? Naturally, he was worried that Cheng Yuan would not cooperate. Cheng Yuan had just become an official and was young and impetuous. If he felt that he had not been put in an important position by the Lord and was suppressed by a person of mediocre background, he would feel uncomfortable and not cooperate in his actions. If that was the case, Su Ku would have a headache. Fortunately, the scene that Su Ku was worried about did not happen. Cheng Yuan was young and inexperienced, but he was methodical and meticulous. Most importantly, he was humble and eager to learn. He would not look down on Su Ku because of his lowly background. No matter how boring and tedious the task was, Cheng Yuan could still concentrate. He was simply a little angel in Su Ku's eyes. Which boss and colleague would not like such a good employee who worked overtime obediently and did not complain? Thus, Cheng Yuan easily gained the favor of Su Ku and Qiguan Rang. The three of them worked very well together. After all, Cheng Yuan was inexperienced. Even if he was careful enough, he still made small mistakes in many places. Su Ku and Qiguan Rang did not find it troublesome. They gave him pointers if they could and helped him make up for his mistakes if they could not, making Cheng Yuan feel like he was bathing in the spring breeze. At first, Cheng Yuan thought that his official career would cause conflict and it would be difficult for him to integrate into the group. Now that he saw it, the people under the Lord were quite easy to get along with. However, today, Xiaoyu asked about elder brother's matters. Cheng raised his eyelids. He had been busy organizing the books and classifying them in detail recently, so he did not pay much attention to his son. Even so, he knew that his son had been going out early in the morning and returning home late at night. He was busy with government affairs. About Gong Luo? What about him? Cheng had 2 sons and a daughter. Other than his eldest son who was an official in another place, his younger son and daughter were still by his side. When the family fled Sui and County, he took his wife, second son, and daughter with him. Only his eldest son, who had a family and a career, was left behind. The eldest son, Cheng Sun, was called Gong Luo. His temperament was like heaven and earth compared to his second son. Xiaoyu asked me if I have an elder brother and even indirectly asked about him. Cheng Yuan was a little baffled, suspecting that his elder brother and Xiaoyu were old friends. Elder brother has been an official for many years and rarely comes home. I don't know much either. Could it be that Xiaoyu is an old acquaintance of elder brother? Or should I say, where have I heard of your name? Cheng's expression changed when he heard that. He looked at his son with pity in his eyes. He knew his eldest son very well. His son was very particular about his family background. His circle of friends would never coincide with Su Ku's, let alone know him. When Su Ku asked if Cheng Yuan had an older brother, the greatest possibility was that he wanted to kidnap him. Cheng lowered his eyes. Not only did he kidnap the old one, but he also wanted to kidnap the boss. Yes, very good. With Gong Luo's temperament, I'm afraid he's not suitable. Cheng Yuan's eyes suddenly widened. After his father's guidance, he finally understood Su Ku's true purpose. Big brother won't come. Cheng secretly pouted. As long as Jiang Pengji was not out of her mind, she would never accept Cheng Sun. Father, I heard that the Lord will lead the army to rescue the emperor tomorrow. You want to go with me? Cheng asked calmly. I want to meet him, but based on the current situation, it's probably impossible. Cheng Yuan did want to go, but he also knew that he would not be of any use if he went. Rescuing the emperor was not a small matter. There would be a chaotic battle at any time. He lacked experience and was still too inexperienced. Cheng said, the situation in the world is already chaotic. Rescuing the emperor will be an important turning point. You don't have to join in the fun. You won't be able to help and will only add to the chaos. Cheng Yuan looked depressed. He had been dealt a blow by his old father. Cheng said in a low voice, however, if you want to stand out, this is also a good opportunity. Father, please give me some pointers. Wanzhou has just been taken, and the foundation is unstable. The Lord wants to transfer a portion of the elites to rescue the Emperor, which means that the troops left to guard the rear will be seriously insufficient. If we want to alleviate the crisis, we can only recruit troops and train the elites at the same time. This shows how much pressure there is. But as long as we can survive the initial period, the Lord's power in the north will be completely stabilized. Do your job well and be pragmatic. When the time comes, no one can erase your share of the rewards. Remember, don't be as eager for quick success as your brother. Stability is the most important. Cheng Cheng analyzed his son clearly and did not forget to give him a warning. He did not like officialdom, but both of his sons had their own ideas. He could only use his own experience to give them some advice. It was a pity that his eldest son disliked him. There was a lot of friction between the father and son. His youngest son was obedient and easy to coax. He had a gentle temperament and could listen to his advice. On the other side, Jiang Pengji had also decided on the lineup for rescuing the emperor. Jing Rong used to work under Prince Changshuo's camp, so I know them better. You are indispensable this time. Jiang Pengji was the first to call out Yang Si. Yang Si showed an expression of despair. She laughed and said, "No matter how strong Prince Changshuo is, can he rush into the camp and cut you into pieces? No matter what, your lord is holding the fort. I won't hand you over." Yang Si secretly wiped his sweat. He had tricked Prince Changshuo so badly. Not only did the emperor want to cut him into pieces, he probably wanted to exterminate his family. Knowing that he was going to face his old boss in front of the army, Yang Si felt a little guilty, but he was also a little excited. As for the other person, after careful consideration, I plan to choose Zisher. The rest of you, stay in Wanzhou. I hope that all of you will guard this area for me. Jiang Pengji did not choose Wei Xiai and the others. Instead, she chose Feng Zhen. His strategy and plan were more suitable for the chaotic situation of the emperor's rescue. When Feng Zhen heard that his name had been called, his eyes lit up, and his spirits rose. He finally didn't have to deal with those disgusting hypocrites and even more disgusting government officials. He recalled the scene of him and Feng Jin dealing with the landowning households in Shangyang County a few days ago. It was a nightmare. My lord is wise. Feng Zhen was grinning from ear to ear. He couldn't hide the smile at the corner of his mouth. As for the military generals, Jiang Pengji chose Li Yun and Dian Yan. The others stayed behind to continue recruiting and training troops. Do you have any objections to this arrangement? She looked around and asked everyone. Meng Han's expression changed slightly. After a while, he stepped forward and volunteered. Jiang Pengji frowned and asked, "Why?" Meng Han said, "The emperor's order to rescue the king is most likely related to the Meng family's defection to Prince Changshuo. I used to be the county commander of Meng County in Tsang Prefecture. I worked for the Meng family, so I know them well. Therefore, I sincerely hope that my lord will allow me to go to war." At this point, he was embarrassed and silent. His expression showed that he was in a dilemma. Meng Han and the Meng family had an irreconcilable hatred. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyes and thought about it carefully. She left Meng Han behind only because he had rich experience in training troops and had a high prestige in the army. He could hold the fort. In comparison, Li Yun and Dian Yan were both rookies. Although they had a reputation, they lacked experience. They should be given more opportunities to make contributions and accumulate military merits. Since Meng Han volunteered, it was not impossible. Luo Yu was a coach in the Imperial Army. He had accumulated enough experience in training troops over the years. If he promoted 2 people to assist him, even if Meng Han followed him to the front lines, it would not affect the rear too much. After thinking about it this way, Jiang Pengji agreed to Meng Han's request. Chapter 673. I'm afraid there won't be any results at this alliance meeting. No matter how many troops I bring, it'll just be a formality. Jiang Pengji pinched her chin and muttered. All kinds of thoughts went through her mind. She said, to prevent the Red Lotus group from reviving, we can't transfer too many troops from Wanzhou. So I've decided to bring 10,000 troops this time. 6,000 elites, 4,000 new recruits, and the rest will stay behind to guard the rear. Qiguan Rang, Feng Jin, and the others frowned imperceptibly. They disagreed with her proposal. Only 10,000 troops? Although Wanzhou's military strength was tight and its foundation was unstable, it wasn't that shabby. Their lord was personally leading the alliance meeting. How could she hold the fort with only 10,000 troops? Her subordinates still had their concerns. They didn't say anything immediately, but the viewers in the streaming room were the first to be dissatisfied. Longevity Su Mucho, no, streamer, are you really that shabby? You're still the governor of Wanzhou, even if it's illegal at the moment. If you don't think you're shabby, others will think you're down and out for the alliance meeting with 10,000 followers. Thinking back to the last century, the leader of the gangsters could bring dozens of followers when he went out for a fight. You'll definitely be looked down upon if you only bring 10,000 troops. Speaking of the alliance meeting, I think of the 18 feudal vassals' crusade against Dong. If they also go through the trouble of electing a leader, you'll definitely be left on the bench with only 10,000 troops. Hand speed expert Yu Wanzhou, haha, upstairs, have you been possessed by the taciturn Huang Xiaotian? Lo Ciji Lianmeng, damn, can you guys change your IDs? Live to 100 years old? I get stabbed in the heart just watching the streaming. Gui Kai Guo Fengxiu, although this series of IDs is very hurtful, little Susu isn't wrong. According to the current situation, if the streamer only brings 10,000 troops, she'll definitely be looked down upon. Whether it's the alliance meeting or the election of a leader, she won't be able to join in the fun. There was a heated argument in the streaming room. A few strategists showed disapproving expressions at first, but they suddenly thought of something and their expressions returned to normal. This change attracted the attention of some viewers. They sent bullet screens one after another, asking for answers. Lu Shi is my husband. Did you guys notice that the strategists were against it at first? Why are they so calm now? I live next door. I surnamed Wang, that's right. I was too busy watching them start a war on the bullet screens just now. Did I miss something? Old Wang is not as good as old Song Chang, I have a rough idea. Oh right, did you forget about the streamer's father, the Chongzhou magistrate, Lu Shi? Indeed, as the audience in the live streaming room, Old Song, had said, the strategists had not objected because they had thought of Lu Shi. Lu Shi also responded to the call to rescue the emperor. Jiang Pengji had only brought 10,000 troops with her, but if she joined hands with her father, Lu Shi, to participate in the alliance meeting to rescue the emperor, could the number of participants be stronger than the father and son? According to the original plan, Jiang Pengji had intended to bring 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers and horses. However, after further analyzing the situation in Wanzhou, she dispelled that idea. Feng Jin and the others did not know, but Jiang Pengji knew very well that her enemies were not only in the open, but also in the dark. The enemies on the surface were easy to deal with, but the enemies in the dark were very troublesome. Considering the situation in Wanzhou, Jiang Pengji chose the more reliable plan after making repeated choices. It was indeed unseemly to bring 10,000 troops to participate in the alliance meeting to rescue the emperor, but Jiang Pengji was certain that no one would dare to look down on her. I wish you victory in advance, my lord. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, let's work hard together. Before the meeting was adjourned, Jiang Pengji called out to Wei Ci. Zixiao, stay here for a while. I need your help with something. Yang Si stared at his friend's face with a complicated gaze. In the end, he was dragged away by Feng Zhen. After leaving the government office, Feng Zhen tucked his hands into his sleeves, a wanton smile on his face. Yang Jingrong, you haven't married yet. Is there something you can't say? Yang Si rolled his eyes impatiently. Fengzhen was going to be his partner for a while, so he could not give him face. What do you mean? Fengzhen smiled and said, I really noticed that you glanced at Zixiao a total of 22 times today. It was like a bolt from the blue. Yang Si's legs turned to jelly and he almost fell down the steps. You wastrel, do you think everyone is like you? Yang Si was so angry that even his beard was about to curl up. Fengzhen smiled, a strange light flashing in his eyes. Although I'm a wastrel, I don't like men. Yang Si swung his sleeves angrily. I don't like that either. Fengzhen snorted and put his hand on Yang Si's shoulder to coax him to the side. He asked in a low voice, did you notice something? Yang Si's heart skipped a beat. His face turned slightly green, and he pretended to hide it. What do you mean notice something? I still have things to do, so I won't bother you. Zixiao and the Lord, is there something going on between you two? The corners of Fengzhen's lips curled up, and he said in a declarative tone, during today's meeting, not only did you look at Zixiao 22 times, but you also glanced at the Lord 23 times vaguely. Tell me, what interesting thing did you notice? Yang Si almost suffocated. Cooperating with such a gossipy wastrel during the alliance meeting was like being retarded. If you're curious, ask them yourself. Fengzhen folded his sleeves helplessly. I asked, but the Lord and Zixiao denied it outright. You know what kind of people they are. I don't want to play tricks with them. I wanted to get something out of them, but I accidentally lost myself. Yang Si secretly snorted. He also didn't want to play tricks with Fengzhen. Fengzhen was shameless, but he still wanted to save face. Fengzhen said, some time ago, the chef came up with a new dish. It's sweet and sour, and it's very appetizing. Don't you want to try it? Yang Si was speechless. She couldn't move him with words, so she changed to tempting him with delicacies. Did he, Yang Jingrong, look like the kind of person who would lose all integrity for the sake of food? Oh, let's go. It's almost lunchtime. Yang Si strode forward with a smile on his face. He had thought it through. According to Jiang Pengji, she wanted to reveal her true identity. Why not test Fengzhen's foundation first? The two of them had been appointed to go to war, so it wasn't strange for them to eat together. Why couldn't they discuss countermeasures while eating? Neither of them were people who followed the rules. They didn't talk during meals. It was fine if there were outsiders around, but it was fine if there were no outsiders. When Fengzhen heard Yang Si's speculation, his lungs were almost blocked by the tenderloin, and he coughed so hard that it shook the heavens and the earth. Jingrong, are you making a fool out of me? Fengzhen's image was a mess. He didn't have that kind of good or evil aura. Instead, he had the aura of a Chinibu. You suspect that the Lord is a woman. That's the biggest joke in the world. Let me tell you, if a woman looks like the Lord, she won't be able to find a husband in this lifetime. I reckon that she can only become a bandit, rob houses, and forcefully kidnap a man from a good family to be her husband. Yang Si was speechless. Fengzhen couldn't help but recall the scene of him and Jiang Pengji secretly drinking and eating meat. The Lord does look a little feminine, but no matter how you look at him, he's clearly a man. When I first came, Fengyi County wasn't so busy. The Lord and I drank together in private and went to brothels many times. Whenever the Lord was around, the courtesans couldn't be bothered to look at anyone else. Whatever obscene lyrics and songs, what common folk stories, what dirty talk, the Lord would just open his mouth. You say, this kind of old gluttonous person immersed in the mortal world, is a woman? Do you believe it? Yang Si was speechless. Chapter 674. Fengzhen's evidence was sufficient. Yang Si didn't know how to refute it. Could it be that his lord was just teasing him? But if that was the case, how could he explain Wuxia? Could it be that these two were so bored that they teamed up to trick him? It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Yang Si didn't have any concrete evidence. He could only deal with it like this. If my lord is really a woman, Fengzhen's eyes narrowed. If she's really a woman, I'll immediately go to the streets and drag someone home to marry to protect my chastity. Fengzhen's words left him speechless. Yang Si laughed dryly. Don't worry. I don't think anyone will be interested in you, Fengzhen returned a smile. He felt safe. That's true. With a good man like Zixiao by his side, he won't be interested in someone like me. Yang Si, the two of them looked at each other in the guest house. There was a bewildered silence. After a while, Fengzhen asked uncertainly, about my lord, how confident are you? Yang Si answered, 100%. After all, the person involved had already admitted it. But he couldn't answer like that. He said vaguely, more than 60%. Fengzhen restrained his teasing attitude. His expression turned serious, and his tone became strangely oppressive. Are you here to tell me the truth? Yang Si's hair stood on end. On the surface, he smiled sincerely. Of course it's a joke. Fengzhen raised his eyebrows. A strange light flashed in his eyes. If Yang Si had insisted on his previous words, he would have thought that he was joking. After all, the fact that his lord was a woman was too shocking. Now that Yang Si said it was a joke, Fengzhen didn't dare to treat it as a joke. But he didn't pursue the matter. Firstly, it was meaningless. Secondly, it was a waste of time. If he wanted to know whether his lord was a man or a woman, the most irrefutable evidence was his body. If Fengzhen was really curious, he could just ask those prostitutes. As he thought of this, his brows furrowed imperceptibly. If he hadn't mentioned this, he wouldn't have noticed a detail. Speaking of which, whenever his lord visited a brothel, he had never really stayed overnight. He didn't even hire a prostitute to sleep with him. Every time, he treated the brothel as a restaurant. He would leave after eating and drinking. Fengzhen chewed on the rice. It tasted like wax, and his thoughts drifted away. His lord was in the prime of his life and was at the age where it was easy to be aroused. It was difficult for a young body to withstand the provocation of the opposite sex. Although those flower girls were not heavenly beauties, they were still in the prime of their lives and had a unique youthful aura. This kind of aura was far more attractive than their figure and appearance. Not to mention others, Feng had come from this age. If he was a normal man, wouldn't he be aroused? It would be fine if the lord had a concubine or a tongfang in her backyard. After all, some people felt that the flower girls were not clean. Even if their throats were on fire, they would still pretend that nothing happened and endure it to go home to find their wives and concubines. However, there was nothing in the lord's backyard. It was clean. Now that he thought about it, there were suspicious points everywhere. Otherwise, the lord is Lu Xiaohui, a true gentleman who has no desires and is unruffled even when he is in love. Either that or the lord was incompetent and couldn't stand up in the face of heavenly beauty. If it was the second one, it would be a pain in the ass. If he couldn't stand up, he wouldn't be able to give birth to an heir. Without an heir, it would mean that he wouldn't have a foundation. Or the lord wasn't a man. He or she was a woman. Faced with these three situations, Fengzhen hoped it was the first, but looking at the lord's old tricks, she didn't seem like a pure gentleman at all. No. Could it be that the lord was really a woman? Pasting the female label on Jiangpengji, Fengzhen felt his legs tremble. He felt like he was going to be scared stiff. It was too scary. At the same time, Fengzhen was still struggling with the mystery of his lord's gender. Jiangpengji was discussing it with Wuxia. There's no other reason for keeping you here. I heard that Zixiao's painting skills are excellent, so please do a painting for me. Compared to the wild imagination of Yang Si and the others, the two people involved didn't have any abnormalities. Painting? Wei Si asked, what does my lord want to paint? Jiang Pengji said, green bricks. To be precise, it should be a house made of green bricks. Wei Si furrowed his brows in deep thought. The audience in the streaming room was also at a loss. The streamer didn't give any hints, so how could they guess? My lord wants to sell green bricks? After all, they were an old couple in their previous lives. Plus, Wei Si's IQ wasn't low, so he figured out the truth in an instant. Other people's alliance meetings were to fight for benefits, but his lord was probably participating in the alliance meetings to cheat others. No, how much profit can be made from selling green bricks? Jiang Pengji revealed a smile that Wei Si was very familiar with. It was the prelude to cheating people. I want to sell the technique of making green bricks. Green bricks are made of mud, not gold. They're big and heavy. How much can they be sold for? If the technique of making green bricks is sold, we can make a profit. What do you think of this suggestion? Wei Si frowned. According to normal thinking, he didn't agree. However, the person who made this suggestion was his lord. She must have her own considerations behind it. He couldn't beat her to death. Faced with Jiang Pengji, Wei Si habitually thought about it over and over again. He didn't want to make any mistakes. After a while, Wei Si asked out of nowhere, who does my lord want to sell it to? The smile on Jiang Pengji's face became more radiant. She knew that Wei Si had seen through her intentions. I'll give priority to whoever's territory is closer to Wanzhou. Wei Si was speechless. His lord's heart had indeed turned completely black. Just as Jiang Pengji said, green bricks were good for construction. Its raw materials were also very cheap, but it had a problem. The transportation cost was almost 100 times higher than the production cost. In other words, if one wanted to use green bricks for construction, they had to build a brick kiln locally. Jiang Pengji sold the technique of making green bricks. This was a very obscure trap. She made the enemy take advantage of her. They contributed manpower and money, dragging down the enemy's pace of development. This was the first reason. When Jiang Pengji stabilized her foundation and completely digested the forces in Wanzhou, she would turn around and attack the enemy again. After taking over, she wouldn't even have to worry about post-war construction. This was the second reason. Because of the horse plague, the economy of the three tribes of the northern borderline has hit rock bottom. The horse farms are almost barren, and their combat power has been reduced by 80% to 90%. If they want to recover, it will take 3 to 5 years. Before that, we have to consolidate our power in Wanzhou and further expand our territory. Jiang Pengji's target was still the three tribes of the northern borderline. However, with the military strength of Chongzhou, Wanzhou, and Hu County, it was impossible to completely destroy the northern borderline. Therefore, she still needed to grow further. Or, she could think of ways to weaken the enemy at the same time. Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes as she thought about it. Zixiao, what else do you think the northern borderline relies on besides cavalry and horses? Wei Si met her eyes and said calmly, pasture. Jiang Pengji said, you understand me very well. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Everything was said without words. The audience in the streaming room shuddered in unison. Chapter 675. Bad-tempered and rude Xiao Shichin. To be honest, I've been lurking in the live stream room for quite some time. I thought I was used to all kinds of situations, but I still got blown up. To deal with the nomads, you actually dared to lay your hands on their lifeblood. Dare I ask what color your heart is? Leo Cg Lianmeng, violent and rude Xiao Shichin, hashtag 000000, hashtag 000000. What does that mean? Purple Fantasy Starfall, number 000000. This is the color code of pure black. Question: dare I ask what color is the host's heart? A. Pure black. There didn't seem to be any problems. Pitiful sigh, what's wrong with pure black? I like all colors of my host's heart. Dark ones are cute too. If he wanted to live a good life, how could he not have some color? Although I'm always hugging the live stream room and scolding the streamer for being trash, in fact, I'm always shouting in my heart that the streamer is so handsome and that the streamer should marry me. I just love to see her trick people and the helpless look on her face. So cute and handsome. Melon Seller Wangpa, no matter what, the host was the commander of the Interstellar Federation in her previous life. She's a big shot in the military. Her heart is definitely not empty. Can you imagine a pure and flawless army commander? How could they defeat their enemies and competitors? Maternal love? The tactics used by soldiers to deal with the enemy could not be called vicious tactics. This was called strategic deployment. Tell me, streamer, how do you plan to cheat the northern borderline? I'll support you even if my phantom limbs harden. What the F***ck, even if your phantom limbs are stiff, you still have to hold on. Jiang Pengji was worried about the integrity of the streaming room. Would such filthy bullet screens really not affect minors? Along with the wave of reward notifications, countless funny comments floated across the screen. Gio, the members of the grass digging team are here to report. Which grassland are we going to dig? Make sure not to leave a single blade of grass for the enemy. Kaihuang's ice cream cone, the captain of the national grass digging team, is here to report. I guarantee that the grasslands will be barren. Mu Qingchen, the grass digging team, is out for battle. I guarantee that no grass will grow. Earth was also stripped bare, leaving nothing for the enemy. Jiang Pengji looked at the bullet screen. Even though she looked calm on the surface, she could not take it anymore. These clowns. Wei Ci frowned. His words pulled Jiang Pengji's thoughts back. But my lord, did the pasture also suffer from a large-scale disease? Wei Ci thought that Jiang Pengji wanted to create an artificial grass disease to deal with the north borderline, so he frowned tightly. Jiang Pengji laughed and said, I do, but does your lord look like such a cruel person? Leave some leeway so that we can meet again in the future. If he tormented the northern borderline to death, wouldn't he be the one who would be tired? Besides, your lord can't get that kind of thing. The northern borderline was vast, and the rich grasslands were all controlled by the northern borderline tribes. They had just suffered a great loss not long ago, and the horse farm's chances of survival were almost cut off. They would be even more cautious in their actions. If we openly deal with them now, isn't that just asking for trouble? As an outstanding hunter, she knew very well that before the bullet rushed out of the muzzle and into the heart of the prey must not feel a trace of killing intent. If she wanted to plot against the northern borderline, especially the northern borderline, which was on high alert, she needed to hide her murderous intent. After all, she still had a group of little princesses waiting to be fed, so she had to be cautious. Wei Ci cleared his mind of distracting thoughts and used a declarative tone. The Lord already has a countermeasure. Jiang Pengji said, naturally. I also intend to leave this matter to you, because you won't let me down. Except for a few generals, the other strategists were all black-hearted. Excluding Yang Si and Feng Zhen, who needed to follow the army, Jiang Pengji carefully considered Qiguan Rang, Su Ku, Feng Jin, and Wei Ci. After careful consideration, she chose Wei Ci. Why? Because this person was like her. Before plotting against someone, he could restrain his evil thoughts very well until the moment the enemy died. Humans would always be biased towards their own kind, and Jiang Pengji was no exception. Wei Ci looked serious and bowed to ask for guidance. Please instruct me, my lord. Jiang Pengji said, come closer. Wei Ci stared at her, and the two looked at each other for a while. There's no one here, my lord can speak frankly. In the end, it was Wei Ci who gave in. He respectfully knelt beside her, and the distance between the two was closer than ever. When Jiang Pengji leaned close to his ear and whispered, her warm breath blew on his earlobe, which was dyed an abnormal blood red. His body heated up. His hands were placed on his knees, and they were tightly clenched into fists under the cover of his wide sleeves. When she finished speaking, Wei Ci had the illusion of a lack of oxygen, as if he had soaked in a hot spring for 2 hours. His brain was faintly dizzy. Jiang Pengji saw his reaction and asked with a smile, do you understand now? Wei Ci blinked and bowed his head respectfully. He regained his composure in an instant. I won't let you down, my lord. Jiang Pengji smiled and squinted her eyes. I know you won't let me down. She left out the word high hopes. Her words sounded a little annoying. Wei Ci looked down and pretended not to know. He used his willpower to restrain the abnormality, but his body loyally betrayed him. Because she was the streamer, the audience could hear her clearly no matter how soft her voice was. Some insensitive viewers were still immersed in Jiang Pengji's conspiracy, and did not notice the interaction between the two. Shenjia, you're evil. Streamer, you're so evil. Aren't you afraid of leading children astray? I become a butterfly and fly away, isn't it popular to set up a black-bellied character? Be it a domineering CEO's delicate wife or a black-bellied prince's arrogant concubine. If the streamer's gender was changed, she would definitely be the world's male god. How many fans would seek death for her? Aizhuahua, don't go off topic. Is there any guru who can analyze if the streamer's plan is feasible? Using the economy to indirectly destroy the ecology of the northern borderline. The streamer who came up with such a sinister idea is really awesome. Very well, the title of Heart Goddess will be given to the streamer. There were 150,000 viewers in the streaming room, and there were viewers from all walks of life. Many of them were idle spectators, but there was no lack of gurus. Sun Yu is not a gohi, my personal opinion. The feasibility is very high. The horse farms of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline have been destroyed by the horse plague. Their economy has suffered a huge blow. Not only the owners of the horse farms, but even the small-scale herdsmen have suffered huge losses. The former are still okay. After all, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. But what about the herdsmen who operate on a small scale? Their lives are more difficult. This audience member analyzed seriously, but his ID made people laugh. Sun Yu is not a gohi, the horse plague is not a man-made disaster. It is a natural disaster. It has spread throughout the entire northern borderline. The economic losses are incalculable. Who will make up for this economic loss? The royal court of the northern borderline? Obviously not. Even in a society like ours, once a national economic loss occurs, almost all walks of life will collapse. Even if the state wants to compensate, the amount that can be compensated is limited, not to mention in the streamer's backward era. Each family can only think of ways to make up for the losses themselves. That's really a case of suffering in silence. Chapter 676. Sun Yu is not a gohi. Do you think the herdsmen will let go of an opportunity to improve their family's economy? Obviously, it's impossible. The northern borderline originally bred rabbits and sheep, but the scale was very small because they had to give most of the pasture resources to horses. Now that horses were scarce, the spare pasture resources could not be wasted. Why not breed sheep and rabbits that could make money? As long as the herdsmen of the northern borderline could breed more rabbits and sheep, Jiang Pengji's plan would be half completed. With the thinking of the ancients, they could not understand the core of this overt plot. They would only realize it after the harm was done. Was it because the ancients were stupid? Of course not. It was because of the unequal information between the two eras. To put it bluntly, the core of this evil plan was to destroy the ecological balance. What was ecological balance? In a biological community and its ecosystem, various opposing factors restrained each other to achieve a relatively stable balance. A small number of rabbits and sheep had limited damage to the ecology of the grassland. The grassland could completely rely on its own ability to recover. However, what if a large number of rabbits and sheep appeared in a short period of time? They were very good at eating grass and could even gnaw on the grass roots. Once a large number of them flooded, it could even cause the grassland to rapidly degenerate. However, the three tribes of the northern borderline were not stupid. Once the destructive power of the rabbits and sheep became obvious and threatened the survival of the horses, it was impossible for them not to think of ways to curb it. If they were really stupid, Jiang Pengji would remind them at the right time. In other words, when the time came, the northern borderline had to use part of their energy to curb the overflow of rabbits and sheep. In this way, Jiang Pengji's goal would be achieved. It would not seriously damage the ecology of the northern borderline, but it could also curb the development of the cavalry of the northern borderline and distract them. It could be considered as killing two birds with one stone. Don't disclose this matter first. Jiang Pengji smiled. You can treat it as an ordinary business. Anyway, we consume a lot of wool every autumn and winter. Therefore, buying things like wool from the northern borderline won't arouse suspicion. For a hunter, patience was a very important quality. As an excellent hunter, she did not lack such things. Wei Ci lowered his eyelids. I will listen to your arrangements. If the purpose was exposed early and everyone knew about it, no matter how powerful the plan was, it would be empty talk. According to her own words, Wei Ci knew that danger lurked everywhere around her. There were very few people she could trust wholeheartedly. How could he let her down? Under the witness of 150,000 viewers, Jiang Pengji and Wei Ci reached a tacit understanding. Being targeted by these two people, the outcome of the northern border could be imagined. Even though he was sold, he still happily helped the person earn money. Before Wei Ci left, Jiang Pengji reminded him again. Zixiao, don't forget the painting I want. Make it as beautiful as you can. I believe in your painting skills. Do you still remember why Jiang Pengji asked Wei Ci to come? She asked Wei Ci to draw a picture for her, emphasizing the uses of the green bricks so that she could promote the technology of firing the green bricks to the feudal vassals who came to rescue the emperor. Wei Ci did not disappoint her. The next day, he presented a long scroll of painting. You finished it so quickly? As she spoke, she unfolded it and found that the ink was not new. It was not a recent painting at all. Jiang Pengji asked carefully and found out that Wei Ci's hobbies were more refined. Painting was just one of them. There were 150,000 viewers in the live broadcast room. There were people from all walks of life, and many of them were artists or related fields. As soon as they saw Wei Ci's painting, they became a little uneasy and sent bullet screen comments to express their doubts. Cola chicken wings, I'll brag about Beauty Ci first. He's good at calligraphy and painting. He doesn't deceive me. However, do you feel that something is wrong? Egg fried Dao Pao, what's wrong? I just think that his painting is very beautiful. It's so beautiful that it's like he's added a lot of filters. Sweet and sour pork tenderloin, after what you said, I also think that Beauty Ci's painting is a little strange. Is it too beautiful? Everyone spoke one after another. At the same time, they did not forget to ask Jiang Pengji to completely unfold the painting to let them see it clearly. They felt that they seemed to have discovered a secret. Man can't forget his roots, I study fine arts and have some research on traditional painting. Although the host's history is different from ours, many of the trajectories are still the same, including painting. Our ancient Chinese painting art rarely sticks to superficial similarities in shape. We pay attention to the wonderful thing is between the resemblance and the dissimilarity and the resemblance of the dissimilarity. We tend to pursue artistic conception rather than realism. However, if you look closely at Beauty C's painting, don't you see a kind of vivid three-dimensional feeling? The painting style leans towards realism. It is indeed very strange. When this opinion was published, it immediately received the approval of most people. Of course, a small number of people expressed doubts. Lulu Buwang Jiangwo, although it leans towards realism, the style is still unique to China. I don't feel that it's out of place. Instead, I feel that it's very harmonious. If you suspect that Beauty CI is a time traveler or something, the hole in your brain is a little too big. Jiang Pengji secretly frowned and helped Wei Ci smooth things over. Host V, when I was in Langyi, I had an exchange of painting skills with him. I guess it was that time that influenced him. The audience cheered and praised Jiang Pengji for not only being able to fight, argue, and fight, but also having more artistic cells than others. Jiang Pengji smiled and rolled up Wei Ci's painting. She squinted her eyes like a fox. Wei Ci did not know what had happened. A faint chill ran down his spine. On that day, the cold wind was biting cold. The flags were blown by the strong wind until they made a thunderous sound. The army set off. Jiang Pengji led the troops into battle. More than 10,000 troops and horses passed through the pure white snow and disappeared into the horizon. Zhongzhou. Zhongzhou was the most powerful of the 5 countries in the Central Plains. It had a strong economy and a vast territory. Dongqing had a total of 6 prefectures and 21 counties. Zhongzhou had 10 prefectures and 33 counties. However, as the leader of the 5 countries, Zhongzhou had not been having an easy time in recent years. The struggle between the factions was getting more and more intense. The situation in the court was changing rapidly. The aristocratic families, the relatives of the emperor, and the eunuchs were fighting non-stop. Blood flowed like a river. The less powerful aristocratic families were jittery. They did not dare to interfere in the court's affairs, talk about the people's livelihood, or delve into the ways of governance. They were afraid that they would say something wrong and lose their heads. These struggles were secondary. They were too distant for the common people. However, there was one thing that was closely related to them. Many people who were suffering turned their faces and spat when they mentioned this person. The Empress of Zhongzhou, the Du family, was a noble daughter of a noble family. It was rumored that this person was as beautiful as a fairy. Her talent and moral character were unparalleled. Although she was a woman, she could argue and compete with the great scholars of the time. After becoming the Empress, she set an example and made a great vow to educate all the women in the world. She studied painstakingly for many years and finally wrote 4 classics: Women's Commandments, Internal Instructions, Women's Analects, and Women's Exemplary Records. These 4 books were highly respected by the great scholars of Zhongzhou and the vast number of scholars. Therefore, they were collectively known as the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. For a time, they were popular in Zhongzhou. They were sought after by the aristocratic ladies of the aristocratic families. Everyone had a set and regarded it as the supreme standard. Some people admired it, but naturally, there were people who opposed it. However, when faced with the trend of the entire country, the voices of opposition were like mosquitoes. They were instantly drowned out. Zhongzhou, in a small town outside the imperial city. In a tea-house, a man in gray sat at the table. He had a long object wrapped in cloth by his hand. Chapter 677. Why had Zhongzhou become the most powerful of the 5 countries in the Central Plains? First, Zhongzhou had a unique geographical advantage. Its borders were only bordered by other Central Plains countries, and there were no foreign invasions. Second, Zhongzhou was the first to be established among the 5 countries. It had seized much of the wealth of the previous dynasty and attracted many noble families. With no foreign invasions and the wealth accumulated by the aristocratic families, it was expected that it would become the leader of the 5 countries. However, excessive comfort had given rise to internal strife. Today, Zhongzhou had followed in the footsteps of Dongqing. The internal strife was becoming more and more brutal. In addition to internal strife, the rich, extravagant, and comfortable life had distorted the thinking of some people, and they could do whatever they wanted. Just as the man in gray had mocked, Zhongzhou had caused so much trouble purely because too few people had died. If they arranged a bunch of enemies for Zhongzhou who were like tigers waiting for wolves, and made their borders unpeaceful, countless young men would be sacrificed, and newborns would be reduced year by year. Let's see if they could still continue with the so-called for self-accomplishment classics for women, forbidding widows from remarrying, restricting women from keeping their chastity. It was the biggest joke in the world. The man in gray left the tea-house and followed his memory to the place where the drowning ceremony was held. By the time he arrived, there was already a crowd gathered in front of him. They were standing by the water's edge and pointing. The noisy discussion was mixed with the sound of crying. The man in gray lowered his eyes and looked in the direction of the crying. The crying child was young. The boy was older, about 7 or 8 years old. The girl was young and skinny, no more than 3 or 4 years old. The two were dark and skinny. Beside them was a young man in his 20s. His expression was ferocious. He protected the child and roared at the crowd. Combining the discussion in the tea-house and the conversation of the villagers watching the drowning ceremony, the man in gray sorted out the outline of the story. Simply put, a young widow in her 20s couldn't bear the loneliness and stole from a man from the same village. She was caught and drowned. The man in gray took 2 steps forward. Taking advantage of his tall stature, he immediately saw the green-skinned drowned woman lying by the pond. Before he arrived, she had already been thrown into a pig cage and drowned. Not long after, the crowd of onlookers dispersed. Their faces still carried the strange joy of violating a taboo. It was so ugly that it was nauseating. The gray-clothed man was about to leave when he saw the young man jump into the water and pick up the half-submerged woman's corpse, preparing to carry it home. He lowered his eyes and stopped in his tracks. He took out some silver and gave it to the child beside the young man. Looking at the young man's attire, he didn't look like a rich man, let alone give the woman a dignified death. The young man trembled and bit his lips. His eyes were filled with tears. After a while, he said in a thick accent, "Thank you, big brother." The man in gray took the opportunity to ask a few more questions and heard another version of the story. The woman who was drowned in the pond was the prettiest girl in the neighboring village. She had married into the village a few years ago. She had been married to her husband for a few years, but her belly had never moved. When she finally got pregnant and gave birth to a girl, her in-laws hated her very much. After her daughter was born, her husband died, and the woman was widowed at a young age. The in-laws treated them harshly, thinking that their granddaughter was a curse to them. They even threw her daughter into the mountains when the woman wasn't paying attention, and she was almost fed to the wolves. The young man went hunting in the mountains and happened to save his daughter. The two of them got to know each other and fell in love with each other. One was a widow who had lost her husband and lived a hard life with her only daughter. The other was a widower who had lost his wife and had a son. The two of them liked each other and were a match made in heaven. After a long time, the barrier was broken. After some discussion, they planned to live together and support each other. However, the woman's in-laws couldn't accept it. They scolded the woman for not keeping her chastity for their son and slandered the two of them for having an improper relationship a long time ago. The couple even went to the chief, hoping to drown the unclean woman to avoid tarnishing the family's reputation. The young man hunted all year round and used his brute force to scare away the people who came to catch the woman. He could protect her once or twice, but how could he protect the woman for a lifetime? This morning, the woman found that her daughter and stepson were missing. She was afraid that the children would be kidnapped and sold or thrown into the mountains to be fed to the wolves by her in-laws. She hurriedly came out to look for them, but she didn't expect that it was a trap. She was caught by her clansmen who had been lying in ambush and forced to drown in the pond. When the young man realized that something was wrong and hurried over, it was too late. After listening to this story, the man in gray let out a short and mocking, "Heh." What was the funniest thing in the world? A woman who could be a husband to any man asked all the women in the world to keep their chastity. Take these tails of silver and move to another place. If they remember it one day, maybe they will also catch this girl. The young man cried and looked like he had suffered a great grievance. However, he didn't accept the kindness of the man in gray. For him, the man in gray didn't come over to scold him and the woman, which was the greatest kindness. The man in gray sighed and gave the money to the boy who shrunk to the side. He couldn't help but rub the girl's hair. "What's wrong with this world?" the young man sobbed and cried while carrying the woman's cold and swollen body. "Oh, evil people will reap what they have sown." The gray-clothed man left behind these words and quietly left. That night, the imperial city was brightly lit. The musical houses were bustling everywhere, and the sound of music and bamboo instruments could be heard. There were many figures and graceful figures that made people daydream. The palace was also filled with music, and there was an extremely luxurious and beautiful atmosphere everywhere. The man in gray used his connections to sneak into the palace and arrived at the Phoenix Palace where the Empress lived with the help of a spy. At the top of the red vermilion gate hung a black board with golden threads. On the board were 3 big words, Phoenix Palace. Inside the palace, candles flickered, and on the eaves carved from sandalwood, there were phoenixes spreading their wings. In the bedroom, the beams were made of sandalwood, and the curtains were made of pearls. A huge moon pearl hung in the sky, shining brightly as if it had hooked the full moon in the sky into the palace. It was like a paradise on earth. The floor was paved with white jade, shining with warm light. It was inlaid with gems and gold pearls, and the floor was chiseled into lotuses. The lotuses were vivid and exquisite, and the stamens were delicate and distinguishable. In the center, there was a gilded incense burner with curling mist. Oh, it was extremely luxurious. The man in gray had already changed his clothes. He walked straight into the palace and didn't meet any palace maids on the way. "Guards, give this Empress." Inside the palace, a woman in a palace dress was kneeling in front of a dressing mirror, putting makeup on. Looking closely, the mirror inlaid with gems was not made of copper. It could clearly reflect a person's figure, and it was as bright as a demon-revealing mirror. Through the reflection of the mirror, the woman in the palace dress saw a man with a weathered face standing behind her. This person's appearance gave her a very familiar feeling. This person seemed to be someone she knew. Her whole body trembled, and then she realized that there was no palace maid in the palace. She suppressed the fear in her heart and pretended to be calm. She turned around and asked him, "Who are you? Nobles have short memories. Do you remember Xiaofan who was murdered by you more than 10 years ago?" Chapter 678. Xiaofan. Wasn't this idiot already dead? The woman was so scared that her face turned pale. She didn't have the extra energy to think and could only shout, "System," in her heart. In an instant, the killing intent had already approached. However, this woman was clearly a weak woman, yet she cleverly avoided Xiaofan's spear. Even though she was in a sorry state as she avoided the killing intent, and the pearls and jadeite ornaments on her head fell to the ground, it did not damage her elegance. Instead, it added a bit of pitiful weakness. As she dodged, she screamed in terror, trying to use her identity to threaten Xiaqian. Xiaqian? Who was that? This empress does not know him. Audacious, unruly commoner, how dare you sneak into the imperial palace to assassinate the empress? 9 generations of your family shall be executed. As soon as she finished speaking, the next attack approached. This time, it wasn't aimed at her heart, but at her forehead. The woman had no choice but to crush something and once again, coincidentally, avoided a fatal blow. Xiaqian frowned. He felt that his spear should have been able to pierce through, but before it could touch this person's body, the spearhead seemed to have touched an invisible layer and was forcefully bounced off. He didn't think too much about it. He didn't have much time left, so he had to kill this monster first. System. The woman screamed in her heart, "Come out." For safety's sake, she had prepared several cards that could help her block fatal attacks. However, those cards were extremely expensive, and she was relatively comfortable in the palace. At most, she would be poisoned by jealous concubines. She rarely used these things, so she didn't exchange for many. He only had 9 in his inventory. He had already wasted 2 just now, so there were only 7 left. If the 7 life-saving cards were used up, she would be dead. According to the system, the life-saving card was like a life substitution puppet, exchanging one life for another. Just now, Xiaqian had shot out 2 spear strikes, killing a life substitution puppet with 1 spear strike. It was frighteningly brutal. She knew that Xiaqian wasn't someone to be trifled with, but she didn't expect that after more than 10 years, this man was still so difficult to deal with. System, come out. The woman screamed inwardly. In an instant, she had used another 5 life substitution puppet cards, leaving her with only 2. At this moment, the system finally responded slowly. 6 million popularity points to exchange for a card, fake? The Supreme of Wulin, the card's effect lasted for 2 hours. Host, do you want to trade? A, I'm sure. B, I'll think about it. With her life hanging by a thread, the last life substitution puppet was destroyed. The beautiful woman in the court dress chose to exchange for it without hesitation. Consider my ass. Of course I'll change it at this time. Although 6 million popularity points hurt, if she did not exchange it, she would lose her life. In an instant, her frail body was filled with tyrannical strength. Not only did the woman who had been fleeing in a sorry state not dodge, she even charged forward to meet him. She moved as fast as lightning, her white hand leaving a shadow in the air that was even more dazzling than the silver spear. She borrowed the force of the spear to deflect it. Xiaqian's brows knit together tightly, and he was even more certain that this unfamiliar woman before him was the monster from many years ago. It was the same back then. His wife, who had never practiced martial arts, suddenly launched a sneak attack and severely injured Xiaqian, who had practiced martial arts since he was a child. Later, he encountered bandits specially arranged by his wife. He was forced to jump off a cliff with his only child to escape death. Back then, when he risked his life to jump off a cliff, if not for a vine that saved him and his child, how would he have the chance to seek revenge now? He was very sure that the woman in front of him, or rather this body, did not know any martial arts. Her body was delicate and frail. If Xiaqian had not coincidentally obtained an item that could lock onto this monster, he would have suspected that he had found the wrong person. Now, the past was repeating itself. This person who did not know any martial arts at all had displayed the combat power of a top martial artist. Even if she was bare-handed, she was still able to force Xiaqian to retreat. If Xiaqian could see supernatural things, he would probably notice that there was a strange wall floating in the air near the woman. Countless words with missing arms and broken legs floated across this wall. 666. Don't you guys think that the streamer looks like Xia Longnu when she fights with her snow-white palace costume? Didn't the streamer perform How to Sleep on a Rope? She's definitely a real-life version of Xia Longnu. Come on, streamer. If you win, I'll buy you 999 luxury yachts today. It's a pity. That middle-aged handsome guy is so charming. I really want to see the hand-to-hand fight between him and the streamer. It must be very passionate. Hee, as expected of a late-night AV/V live broadcast room. Can this female streamer, who sells her body, not insult Xia Longnu? Xia Longnu is as pure as ice and as clean as jade. What kind of trash is she? I have a 200 gigabytes folder on my computer, and she's a goddess. Hee. Xie Qian's spear technique was swift and fierce, carrying a fatal murderous intent. The beautiful woman was like the world's most flexible body, and her figure was soft but firm. No matter how Xie Qian attacked, the woman always responded with ease, and her defense was impenetrable. The two figures began to fight in the spacious palace. After more than 300 moves, Xie Qian's offensive had already begun to weaken, but the woman was still not flushed or out of breath. From being evenly matched at the beginning, she gradually gained the upper hand. A sinister look flashed in her eyes, and her attacks became more ruthless. You've really reincarnated again. Where's Yun-Er's corpse? Xie Qian secretly looked for an opportunity, hoping to find the woman's flaw and directly kill her. The beautiful woman's eyes were shimmering, and a faint pink light flashed through them. Her cherry lips spat out vicious words. Back then, when I took over her body, her soul was still there. The beautiful woman in the palace dress said with a smile, and her moves became more and more sinister and treacherous. In other words, she knew everything I did. Later, I got tired of it and returned her body. Xie Qian's expression changed dramatically, and his hand holding the spear couldn't help but pause. The woman seized the opportunity to attack him. He reacted quickly and pushed her away, and the distance between them increased again. However, his arm was faintly numb. The beautiful woman in the palace dress continued to smile, ignoring Xie Qian's face that was as black as the bottom of a pot. She continued to provoke him, making him angry. Xie Xiaohe, if you didn't have the intention to kill me back then, maybe I would have spared Wang Huiyin's life and returned her to you. But you were heartless first, so you can't blame me for being unjust later. I returned Wang Huiyin's body and directly threw her into the palace's musical house. She became a prostitute for the officials and was molested by anyone. She was quite fierce and committed suicide for you to prove her innocence. As her husband, don't you feel touched? As such, how could Xie Qian bear it anymore? His originally weak attacks became fierce again, with an indomitable killing intent. Which? The beautiful woman easily dealt with it. Not only was she not angry, but she even winked at him. Taking the opportunity of the fight, she burrowed into his arms and quickly flew away. Xie Qian was so angry that he couldn't maintain his rationality. At this time, messy footsteps came from outside the palace, accompanied by the sound of armor rubbing against each other. Xie Qian glared at the beautiful woman with eyes full of killing intent. Full of unwillingness, he made a feint with his spear to force her back, and then jumped out of the window to escape. The beautiful woman didn't chase after him, or rather, she, a half-baked martial arts supreme with a time limit, couldn't kill Xie Qian. She looked down at her own attire, took out a dagger from the void, and fiercely cut herself a few times. Then, she closed her eyes and fell into a pool of blood. At this time, the palace door was smashed open, and the frightened voice of the palace attendant entered her ears. Chapter 679. The Zhongzhou Empress was assassinated, and the emperor was furious. He ordered the assassin to be captured within 3 days and killed on the spot. What about the empress who had lost a lot of blood? Inside the Phoenix Palace, the Empress' face was pale and her eyes were shut tight. Her breathing was weak, and her chest rose and fell almost imperceptibly. Her haggard appearance was heart-wrenching. The Empress had fallen into a deep coma due to her severe injuries and blood loss, and no one knew when she would wake up. Little did they know that while the Empress' body was asleep, her soul was unusually active. In order to cover up her flaws, she had used a dagger to hurt herself, and her soul had already flashed into the portable system space. There was a modern and romantic bungalow in the system space. It was exquisitely designed and had a garden, covering an area of more than 1,000 square meters. There were all kinds of household appliances. In order to make her life comfortable, she had spent a huge amount of popularity points to exchange for a generator and gasoline from the system to ensure that the entire villa had electricity all day long. Aside from being unable to log into the internet, her life was even better than before she transmigrated. System, what happened to you just now? Why did you only reply after I called you for so long? The beautiful woman in the palace gown had a gloomy expression. Her heart was bleeding when she thought of the life substitution puppet she had lost. One life substitution puppet card required 888,888 popularity points. If she had not prepared 9 cards for herself, Xia Qian would have killed her long ago. Thinking of the dangerous situation just now and Xia Qian's murderous intent, her face was extremely gloomy. Also, why didn't Xia Qian die? Thinking of the 9 life substitution puppets she had lost and the 6 million worth of fake Supreme of Wulin, she felt her heart tremble. If the system had responded earlier, she would not have had to pay such a huge price. After a while, the system's rigid electronic voice sounded in her ears. Host, this is normal. It's not that I didn't react in time, but Xia Qian's attack was too sharp and accurate. He destroyed a life substitution puppet with one shot, and the whole process took only 3 breaths of time. The system said solemnly, Host, you have committed a grave sin. Now that Xia Qian has escaped, he will definitely not let this go. Letting a tiger return to the mountain will lead to endless trouble. You were too careless. The woman was flustered. That year, I clearly saw Xia Qian jump off the cliff. She had never thought that an ancient man would be able to see through her disguise. With the help of the system, she felt that her acting was quite good, but she still exposed herself. If it wasn't for the system's reminder, she wouldn't have known that Xia Qian wanted to get rid of her. Although this world was in the ancient times, there were indeed a few people who were on the level of Taoists, such as monk Liao Chen from the Hejian temple. Thinking of these strange people, the woman couldn't help but feel angry. Aren't you omnipotent? Why don't you know that Xia Qian is still alive? If it wasn't for Xia Qian, she wouldn't have had to spend so much money to get out of trouble. The system said coldly, this is not within the system's jurisdiction. The reason Xia Qian is still alive is because the host was careless. It has nothing to do with the system. The woman was infuriated. She smashed the expensive tea set on the tea table with a sinister expression. Xia Qian. Wang Huiyun. This couple is really my bane. The woman said angrily, her cheeks flushed. If I had known that Xia Qian would do this, would have imprisoned Wang Huiyun's soul back then so that she wouldn't be able to rest in peace even after death. The system remained silent. The woman was an outsider who had transmigrated from another world. However, she did not take over the body after transmigrating. This was because Wang Huiyun's soul was still in the body, and this soul was very strong. She had no way of taking over the body of the original Wang Huiyun. It was only when Wang Huiyun gave birth that her body and soul gradually weakened. With the help of the system, she seized the opportunity to take control of the body. Although Wang Huiyun was a married woman, her looks and family background were top-notch. She was a fair, rich, and beautiful woman, and she even married a tall, rich, and handsome man. She really thought that her luck had changed and she had activated her winner mode. Who knew that Xie Qian would have a murderous intent towards her? Moreover, there was a troublesome fraud who had interfered and awakened the sleeping soul of Wang Huiyun. After this woman woke up, she fought with her for control of the body, causing her to suffer a lot. Later on, the woman changed her body and returned the original body to Wang Huiyun. She had wanted to torture her to vent her anger, but she did not expect that this woman's temper would be so fierce that she directly begged for death. Humph. She got off lightly. Otherwise, she would definitely anger Xie Qian again. After a while, the woman calmed down a little. Thinking of how scary Xie Qian was, the woman was extremely nervous and involuntarily clenched her fists. System, how many popularity points do I have left? The system said dutifully, 97. 63 million popularity points. Do you want to redeem a life substitution puppet? The woman scratched her head in frustration. Against that lunatic Xie Qian, no matter how many life substitution puppets I have, they won't be enough for him to kill. The host can learn martial arts. The system store has the top martial arts from various martial arts dimensions. What's the use of martial arts secret manuals? You won't be able to beat Xie Qian even if you sharpen your spear at the last minute. Moreover, practicing martial arts will deform your body. Who wants to suffer that kind of pain? Don't you have anything here that can be learned quickly? The woman scoffed and started to flip through the system store. She had thought of learning it herself, but after trying the skill books sold by the system, she was unwilling to learn it manually. Why would she waste so much time learning something that could be done with a skill book? Only a fool would do that. The system dutifully pulled out what the woman wanted. The dazzling skill books were dazzling. They were all martial arts secret manuals that the woman was familiar with. 9 Yang Divine Skill, 9 Yin Manual, Yi Jin Scripture, Minor Phaseless Skill, Tianshan Plum Snapping Hand, 8 Desolation and 6 Directions Technique. There were also countless orange martial arts skill books that were not famous, but were of the same grade. However, all of these top-notch orange skill books had one thing in common: they were expensive. 10 million popularity points. Why don't you just rob a bank? The woman gritted her teeth in anger, but she knew that the system would not give in. She was just complaining that the system was selling things at too high a price. She bought a skill book of the 9 Yin Manual, a skill book of the wave-like subtle steps, a skill book of the jade female sword art, and a skill book of the left and right interfighting technique. With the left and right interfighting technique, one person would be able to perform the harmonious dual swords with great power. The 3 skill books and 1 supplementary skill book cost her a total of 35 million popularity points. Looking at the plummeting numbers in her account, her heart ached terribly. However, she knew that if she did not strengthen herself, Xie Qian would make a comeback. She slapped the cover of the skill book 4 times in a row. The orange quality skill book turned into a golden light and melted into her body. In just a moment, she knew that she had mastered the top-notch martial arts. Wave-like subtle steps was performed, and her figure was as ethereal as a fairy. After standing still, she looked at herself and muttered to herself, "This money was well spent. When I transmigrate back, let's see who dares to bully me. Those bitches that are cheap to the bone, I'll tear them apart one by one." Humph. Chapter 680. The system remained silent and did not respond. It was boring to be alone. She would get bored after a few rounds of martial arts. Sitting on the sofa and hugging a soft and comfortable pillow, the woman asked the system, "Are there any missions now?" After a while, the system replied, "Yes." A viewer named Butterfly's Tears of Sorrow posted a mission for 99 luxurious private yachts. Another viewer named It's Not My Fault for Loving You posted a mission for 88 aircraft carriers. The woman's eyes lit up and she quickly opened the mission list. A luxurious private yacht was equivalent to 1,000 popularity points, while an aircraft carrier was equivalent to 10,000 popularity points. She had just spent a large sum of popularity points, so she had to make the most of it. The contents of the two missions were almost the same. The woman could not help but frown. These men with brains. The first mission was to have a night with her in her queen's dress. The second was to have a night with the emperor's concubine. The system's voice said calmly, separated by a dimension, the viewers are not stingy with their evil intentions. Anyway, no one will know their true colors. Who wouldn't want to spend a small sum of money and enjoy the treatment of an emperor? Host, do you accept the mission? The woman snorted and said decisively, of course I do. Why wouldn't I? I'm really short on money now. Let's follow the old rules. Just as the system said, separated by a dimension, strangers would not deliberately hide their true nature and evil intentions. Her live streaming room had been upgraded to level 6 and could currently accommodate 700,000 viewers. When the live streaming room was upgraded to level 6, the system had another function. It could allow viewers from another dimension to experience sensory pleasure that was infinitely close to reality in their dreams. At first, the viewers were willing to pay for her live streaming with other men. They would not lose anything anyway. Later, when they found out that the live streaming room had this function, the viewers' demands became more explicit. However, she would not do it herself. Who knew if the viewers were humans or dogs? She was not a prostitute. However, the viewers were her bread and butter. She could not simply go against them, so she thought of another way. She used the palace maid beside her as her substitute. After all, she had placed a loyalty talisman on the palace maid, so she would not betray her. TSK, if only the loyalty talisman was effective on Xiaofan. Damn it, she had tried to cast a loyalty talisman on Xiaofan, but she didn't know what he had on him, and the loyalty talisman was destroyed. Xiaofan has been practicing martial arts since he was young. He can be considered a grandmaster. Ordinary loyalty talismans won't work on him. The system poured a bucket of cold water on her. The woman curled her lips and said, TSK, then why didn't you give me the unusual loyalty talisman? Yes, but you can't afford it, the system said. The woman was astonished and asked it, there really is. Let me see. Grade 9 loyalty talisman, orange quality. According to their quality, they were divided into gray, white, green, blue, purple, and orange. Orange was the highest grade and the most expensive. 25 million points. F***CK. Why don't you just rob someone? The woman was exasperated. She asked indignantly, this grade 9 loyalty talisman can make Xiaofan submit? No, he's just a small fry. Using the grade 9 loyalty talisman won't kill him. The system laughed. This grade 9 loyalty talisman has an 80% chance of making the Son of Providence submit to you. The woman's heart trembled. She blurted out, including Emperor Chen? Including her. The woman secretly gritted her teeth. She seemed to be hesitating whether to buy it or not. But I don't even know who Emperor Chen is. It's useless even if I buy it. The woman said gloomily, that old man Lu Shi is so annoying. I've received a lot of fake news, but there's still no news of Emperor Chen's whereabouts. In order to fit in with history, I even sacrificed that useless daughter of mine. Who knew that she would be so useless and die so worthless? Lu Shi had intentionally led her mistress, Lu Huan, away. She had thought that Lu Shi had no daughter and that Lu Huan, the mistress's daughter in name, had a chance to become Emperor Chen. She had not expected that she would be so useless. TSK. Gu Min, that damned bitch, the woman suddenly muttered. The system knew why she was cursing Gu Min, who had passed away a long time ago. That year, when the woman found out that Gu Min was a transmigrator, she first used the soul-searching technique on Gu Min to prevent her from ruining things. After carefully looking through Gu Min's memories, she unexpectedly found out that Gu Min actually came from the future of this plane. The current child of fortune was Lu Shi's daughter, the future Emperor Chen of the Jiang dynasty. However, with the addition of Gu Min and the hindrance of Lu Shi, the identity of Emperor Chen became complicated and confusing. The woman had been searching for many years, but there had been no progress. If it wasn't for Gu Min shamelessly stealing her own brother-in-law, I wouldn't have been unable to find out who Emperor Chen is. F***CK. The system whispered bewitchingly, actually, it's not that difficult. As long as you are willing to pay the price, you can buy all kinds of information. The woman was exasperated. So many points of popularity. You're going to overdraft me. The system said, it's not expensive at all. You can buy any piece of information with 30 million points of popularity. The woman hesitated for a long time. She thought of Emperor Chen, who would unify the Central Plains in the future. She felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. There was no special reason for her to be so against Emperor Chen. It was only because he threatened her. The system had said that if Emperor Chen lived and unified the universe, she would die. Because of the so-called law of the plane, only one of them could live. If one did not look out for oneself, heaven and earth would destroy them. Compared to Emperor Chen, of course, she would let that dog Emperor Chen die. On the other hand, as long as she reached the peak of her live-streaming level, she could make a wish and transmigrate back. She could even bring everything she had obtained from the system. Her current goal was to upgrade her live-streaming room to level 7. Once it reached level 7, she would need to spend another billion points of popularity to open up a channel to the cultivation plane. If the cultivators there rewarded her with elixirs, cultivation techniques, rare herbs, or even celestial beasts, she would be able to receive the real thing. With these, she would become an immortal cultivator. When she transmigrated back, wouldn't she be able to turn the world upside down? It was a pity that the nearly 100 million points of popularity that she had painstakingly accumulated through her live streaming and completing missions were going to be squandered again. However, if she spent 25 million points of popularity to buy the Grade 9 Loyalty Talisman and 30 million points of popularity to buy information about Emperor Chen, she would be able to completely eliminate this hidden danger. Then she would be able to enjoy her transmigration life in peace. She could start live streaming without any worries and earn popularity points. She gritted her teeth and said, "Buy. Buy them all. I want to know who that dog of a emperor is." After a while, a letter appeared in front of her. It was an orange talisman in a jade box. The texture of the letter was like fine mutton fat jade, and there were 2 large golden words written on it, Lu Shi. The woman was shocked. The next moment, her expression turned ferocious. D***MN, you're saying that Lu Shi's son, Lu Shi, is a woman? The system seemed to be surprised as well. After a while, it said, the data doesn't lie. Lu Shi is the son of Providence, the historical Emperor Chen. The woman was even more furious. She smashed the things in the living room like a madwoman. Who could remain calm when they found out that the person they had ignored for years was the target? Chapter 681. If one were to ask who the lady hated the most, Lu Shi was undoubtedly number 1, followed by Gu Min, and lastly, the thorn in her side, Emperor Chen. She had spent 30 million popularity points to buy news about Emperor Chen, only to receive such an answer. How could she not be angry? After a while, the lady had smashed everything in the living room that could be smashed. Only then did her anger subside. Her hair was a mess, and her clothes were disheveled. She lay on the sofa, panting slightly to calm the raging fire in her chest. Lu Shi and Gu Min. 2 bitches. She ground her molars in anger, her beautiful face carrying a frightening malevolence. especially this Gu Min. An ordinary transmigrator, tormenting the paper workshop, and making bricks and glass to make money. Did they think she couldn't tell that she had used such a crappy method in a transmigration novel? She was already dead, but she still left behind such a big problem. How annoying. Of course, despite her anger, she wouldn't be jealous. What was the point of Gu Min remembering these techniques after transmigrating? She had the system as a cheat. She was much better than that ugly transmigrator, Gu Min. As long as she accumulated enough points, what technique could she not have? Just from her cheat, it was obvious who was the one favored by the heavens. Everything she obtained in this world would become her wealth when she transmigrated back. That was why she was secretly accumulating money. She found out that there were traces of glass in the northern borderline. They were being sold at exorbitant prices. An ordinary piece of low-quality glass cost tens of thousands of strings of coins. She gritted her teeth and decided to exchange for the glass firing technique from the system. She didn't expect it to cost 45 million popularity points. The system told her that this technique wasn't worth much in her eyes, but it was epic-making for this plane. The glass firing technique had already surpassed the technological level of this era. That was why it was so expensive. If she thought it was too expensive, she didn't have to buy it. In the end, she bought it. She had to look at this business from the perspective of development. In order to make a lot of money, she gave the technique to her confidants and had them burn the glass to sell. At first, she made a lot of money. However, she wasn't thorough and leaked the news. The huge profits attracted the jealousy of the other aristocratic families. She gave her confidants a loyalty talisman, but the craftsmen in the kiln didn't. These craftsmen became a breakthrough. The core glass firing technique was leaked, and the merchants who followed suit were like carps crossing the river. Within Zhongzhou, from top to bottom, there was a devilish trend of producing glass and making a lot of money. She was dreaming in the palace, completely unaware of the situation outside. When she found out that she had used 45 million popularity points to exchange for the glass firing technique, she had only earned less than 1 million strings of coins. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood and hated Gu Min even more. As for the consequences that this bubble economy brought to the people, she did not care at all. Letting Gu Min die like this is really letting her off easy. The woman looked down at the grade 9 loyalty talisman in her hand, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. System, what's the level of my strength now? It's equivalent to the level of this world's grandmasters, and its battle prowess is about the same as the supreme of martial arts from before. The woman's face lit up. According to the system, her martial prowess was already top-notch. Just a moment ago, he had felt that it was a waste of popularity points, but now he felt that it was worth it. Would she be afraid of Xia Qian now that she was at the level of a grandmaster? Why would he be afraid of a mere Lu Shi? The woman gritted her teeth and said, "Then do you know where that little bastard Lu Shi is now?" The system asked in return, "Host, why are you asking this question?" She snorted and sneered, "I spent a huge amount of popularity points to exchange for the grade 9 loyalty talisman to buy information about her. Of course, it's to make trouble for her. Otherwise, what's the use of exchanging for it? There's only one, and there's only one chance. Of course, I'll only feel at ease if I do it myself." The system understood. "Host, are you planning to leave the palace? If you leave, what about the Empress in the palace?" The woman's heart wavered. She had spent too much effort on the position of Empress. How could she be willing to give it up just like that? Firstly, it was not easy to obtain the position of Empress. How long had she been planning for this? Secondly, the Empress could enjoy the wealth of Zhongzhou first. Using this identity, she had secretly amassed countless precious treasures over the years. When she transmigrated back, any one of them would be a treasure worth millions. It would allow her to go from a penniless small-time broadcaster to a Ms. Perfect with countless treasures. How could she be willing to abandon this money tree? Even if she had to abandon it, it would not be now. She secretly gritted her teeth, thinking about how to solve this matter perfectly. Thirdly, the audience in the live streaming room were mostly otakus who loved beauties. A small portion of them were tycoons who were not stingy with their money. They were willing to spend money and were generous. They often issued various tasks, putting themselves in the shoes of the emperor and spending time with the concubines in the harem. If she lost the identity of Empress, she would lose a portion of her tycoon audience. It would be a great loss. However, if she did not leave the Zhongzhou Palace, she would not feel at ease handing over the grade 9 loyalty talisman to others. The plan now, the woman's eyes narrowed, and a plan formed in her mind. Didn't Xie Qian sneak attack me and make me lose consciousness due to excessive blood loss? How about this, get a substitute puppet to replace me, and I'll use it to escape the palace. The system's products must be of the highest quality. The substitute puppet you get will definitely not let anyone know that something is wrong. Even though she was sucking up to the system was still heartless. 5 million points of popularity, no bargaining. The woman was so angry that she pouted, but in the end, she still agreed angrily. She muttered to herself, "Scammer Zhou, profiteer." On the other side, Xie Qian's assassination had failed. He did not delay and decisively chose to retreat. After paying a small price, Xie Qian successfully shook off his pursuers. He leaped into the cold palace and met up with a middle-aged palace maid. Seeing Xie Qian's gloomy and unwilling expression, the palace maid knew that Xie Qian's assassination had failed. She could not help but sigh. "Mr. Xie, please follow me." The palace maid's face was covered in wrinkles, and she looked older than her actual age. Xie Qian coughed softly, aggravating his injuries. His face was as pale as snow. "Sorry for the trouble." The palace maid was dressed in the lowest grade of palace maid attire, but she had a calm demeanor and an extraordinary bearing. She walked without making a sound. Even though she was accompanied by an assassin who had barged into the palace, she did not panic and helped Xie Qian send away the guards who were searching the palace. After doing this, the palace maid loaded him into a clean bucket of swill and sent him out of the palace that night. The swill cart left the palace. Along the way, Xie Qian changed cars and hid in a large family's dimly lit house. "Looks like you didn't kill that witch." Xie Qian was fiddling with bottles and jars, frowning as he applied medicine to himself. Chapter 682. Chang Zhai, you said she's a witch, so of course she knows some sorcery. How can a mere mortal take her life so easily? This witch is indeed strange. She's clearly not trained in martial arts, but not only could she dodge my killer move, but she was also evenly matched with me. A middle-aged man in a black robe stood outside the door. Due to his good health, he looked 2 years younger than Xie Qian. "I can't rest easy if I don't kill this witch." The middle-aged man known as Chang Zhai walked into the room and sat not far from Xie Qian. His thin face flashed with gloom. The man's surname was Wan, and his name was Xian. He was a respected scholar of his time, and a famous scholar. Xie Qian scoffed. "What a coincidence, I thought so too. This witch's methods are evil, and a mortal might not be able to kill her. She's also hiding in the palace, and security is tight. After what happened today, she'll be even more careful. It'll be difficult to kill her next time." Wan Xian clenched his fists, and his eyes were filled with despair. This witch has immortal methods. How could a mortal fight against a demon immortal? This witch had destroyed his family. Was there no one who could deal with her? 3 or 4 years ago, Wan Xian's daughter was only 15 years old, just of marriageable age. That year, his daughter went to the temple to pray for her family, but she accidentally lost a handkerchief. Unfortunately, it was picked up by a hoodlum. Not only did he pick it up, this ruffian even went around announcing that this handkerchief was given to him by a certain family's wife. Everyone thought that his daughter had an illicit relationship with this ruffian, and that the originally arranged marriage was ruined, and the husband's family avoided him at all costs. The inflexible elder felt humiliated, and while he was not at home, he brought a group of people to drown his daughter. He called it, using death to prove his daughter's innocence, protect her chastity, and protect the Wan clan's reputation. Not only that, even Wan Xian's younger sister, who was married and left home, was also drowned. In one night, he had lost two of his most beloved family members. In his anger, Wan Xian not only hated the Wan clan, but also the source of all this, the Zhongzhou Empress. If it weren't for this woman's mischief and that bullshit for self-accomplishment classics for women, would his daughter and sister have lost their lives because of this? He had never believed in these supernatural theories, but he had no choice but to believe in someone that even Xia Qian could not kill. Xia Qian sneered. Even if the demoness has some tricks up her sleeves, it's still a demonic trick. Immortals? How could that wicked woman, who could be a husband to any man, be qualified to use this word? Wan Xian calmed himself down and asked, Xiaohe, what should we do now? Wan Xian and Xia Qian had used their connections and made meticulous arrangements. This had given Xia Qian the opportunity to infiltrate the Celestial Phoenix Palace and assassinate the Empress. Now that the assassination had failed, Wan Xian felt that if the Emperor sincerely pursued the matter, he wouldn't be able to hide it for long. Sooner or later, they would be found out. Before the Emperor could react, they had to make preparations to escape. If he continued to stay in Zhongzhou, sooner or later he would be caught and chopped into pieces. Xia Qian paused in the act of bandaging his wound, as if he was deep in thought. He said, the only thing we can do now is to protect ourselves before making any other plans. If we continue to stay in Zhongzhou, we will die sooner or later. We might as well escape to another country. Nansheng is in the midst of war, and we can't even protect ourselves. It's not wise to go there. Beiyuan and Xichang are too far away, and these two countries have good relations with Zhongzhou. Going there would be suicide. Looking at it now, Dongqing is safer. Lu Zhongqing's son is promising. Both father and son grew up drinking ink, and they have a deep hatred for the demoness. Relying on them should be a good choice. Wan Xian listened carefully and agreed without hesitation. I'll pack my belongings and leave at night. Xia Qian grabbed Wan Xian's sleeve to stop him from acting foolishly. He wasn't a homebody like Wan Xian. He was very experienced. Not now. The timing is too sensitive. Stay calm and wait for a day or two. The Empress has just been assassinated. If you pack your belongings and prepare to move, wouldn't that be a confession? Do what you need to do these 2 days. Don't give yourself away. Wan Xian had no choice but to listen to Xia Qian's advice. Xia Qian asked as he put on his clothes and slowly fastened his belt. If you leave, what will happen to the Wan family? Wan Xian's face darkened and he sneered. It's none of my business. I'll leave it to fate. They owe me after all. Wan Xian lost his wife at a young age. He originally wanted to remarry for his daughter. After all, a daughter's upbringing couldn't be separated from her mistress. But coincidentally, his younger sister had a conflict with her husband's family and left. He simply asked his younger sister to help him raise his daughter. He gave up on the idea of remarrying and devoted himself to learning, slowly making a name for himself. Not only did he befriend many famous people, but he also had some achievements in the officialdom and brought glory to the Wan family. To put it bluntly, Wan Xian's contribution was 80% due to the Wan family's prestige in Zhongzhou. However, not only was the Wan family not grateful, but they also took advantage of him and took advantage of him. In the end, They used the excuse of preserving their chastity and protecting their family's reputation to drown Wan Xian's two most important family members. If not for the hatred in his heart, he probably wouldn't have been able to withstand the successive blows and would have died long ago. Implicating the Wan family? This was what they owed him, and they had to repay him sooner or later. Xia Qian didn't say much. This was Wan Xian's private matter, and he couldn't interfere. 2 days later, the imperial city was on high alert, and the search area was further expanded. Seeing this, Xia Qian asked Wan Xian to get ready to move. At this moment, Wan Xian's connections played an important role. Not long after, the wheels of the carriage slowly rolled in the direction of Dongqing, leaving the imperial city far behind. Wan Xian looked back with a regretful expression. "We've already left the imperial city. Sigh, I guess we'll never return in this lifetime." He was over 40 years old and was considered half a foot in the grave. Now, he had to bear the pain of leaving his homeland. If not for that wicked woman, he wouldn't have been reduced to the state of a stray dog. Xia Qian's injuries hadn't healed and he couldn't ride a horse, so he could only sit in the carriage. Hearing his old friend Wan Xian's lament, he sneered. "If you can live longer, you might be able to return." Wan Xian looked at him in surprise. Xia Qian said, "Look at the situation in Zhongzhou. It's just a second Dongqing. The emperor was incompetent and favored the demon empress. He allowed those who didn't do anything to exploit the people and fill their own pockets. He didn't care about the people's livelihood at all. The struggle in the court was getting more and more intense. How many innocent people became cannon fodder in the fight between the gods? As for the influential aristocratic families in Zhongzhou, they were even more laughable. Everyone had high positions and generous salaries, and half of the court's power was in their hands. Financially, they controlled the mountains and swamps, seized large tracts of land and tenants, and avoided paying taxes. On the other hand, they exploited the people. In such a comfortable environment, a large number of aristocratic families who indulged in leisure and debauchery were born. They held power but didn't care about government affairs. Could Zhongzhou still be saved in such a state? They would be doomed. Wan Xian lowered his eyes and pondered. Xia Qian said, "Let's take one step at a time. If Zhongzhou is in chaos, it might be our best opportunity." That wicked woman was fearless, largely because she was the Empress of Zhongzhou. The entire country was her backer. If Zhongzhou was gone, it would be much easier to deal with that wicked woman. Chapter 683. The area near the Huangshui River was named Huangshui County after its tributary. It was located at the border of Chenzhou. Ever since the imperial family issued an edict to summon the heroes of the world to defend the king and fight against the traitors, troops from all over the country responded to the call and gathered here. They set up camp near Huangshui County. The camp stretched for more than 200 miles. It was a magnificent sight. From the governor to the county magistrate, there were no less than 20 people from all over the country. There were more than 400,000 troops gathered. Prince Changsho was so upset that he couldn't even sleep well these days. Who knew there would be so many forces that responded to the call for help? Where did these people come from? They were about to invade Chenzhou. The Meng family of Zhangzhou cooperated with him from the inside and the outside. The situation was good. Who knew that his brother would shamelessly issue an edict to rescue the king and summon forces from all over the country? What was this equivalent to? This was supposed to be a private matter between the two brothers. No matter how ugly the fight was, it was still a family matter. But his brother couldn't beat him, so he shamelessly sat on the ground and cried like a rascal. He pretended to be pitiful and called a group of reinforcements to help him fight. One mustn't wash one's dirty linen in public. His brother made it known to the whole world. It was really embarrassing, too embarrassing. Prince Changsho ordered the scouts to continue scouting. There were already as many as 400,000 reinforcements in Huangshui County. Quickly invite County Chief Meng over to discuss. Prince Changshu was so worried that his hair was about to fall off. After not seeing him for a while, he had lost a lot of weight. He didn't know why he was so unlucky. Every time his luck was about to take a turn for the better, he would be beaten back to his original state. Not long after, the soldiers carefully invited a middle-aged man with a gloomy face and low-key clothes. When Prince Changshu saw him, his eyes lit up as if he had seen his savior or second parent. The middle-aged man looked good. He had a neatly trimmed beard and a pair of hawk-like eyes that were dark and sinister. When he looked at people with those eyes, there was a gloomy look in his eyes that made people very unhappy. As soon as he came over, the middle-aged man asked in a gloomy tone, "Your Highness, why are you so anxious?" Prince Changshu suppressed the unhappiness in his heart and smiled helplessly. How can this king not be anxious? Those rebels and traitors have gathered at the Huang River, and they have as many as 400,000 soldiers. If they work together with the remaining soldiers in Chenzhou and surround us, then I won't be able to escape even if I have wings. Mister, do you think this prince can still keep his cool? The middle-aged man was the leader of the Mengs in Cangzhou, Meng Zhan, the ex-husband of Lu Shi's stepwife. He heard Prince Changshu's heartfelt words, and sneered coldly. They're just a bunch of unruly people with ulterior motives. Your Highness doesn't need to take them to heart. Now, as long as they did not make a move, they would collapse on their own. Back then, when Dongqing, Zhongzhou, Beiyuan, and Xichang assisted Nanqing to fight against Nanman together, didn't the four factions of Nanman also fight and retreat at the same time, allowing the internal strife of the four countries to occur, which eventually led to the collapse of the alliance of the four countries? Your Highness might as well sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight against this group of forces that are here to rescue the emperor. This bunch of unorthodox people will sooner or later have internal strife. Upon hearing this, Prince Changshu's anxious heart calmed down a little. But, when he thought of the magnificent barracks that stretched for more than 200 miles, his heart still trembled involuntarily. No matter how reasonable Meng Zhan's words were, he was still worried. Meng Zhan furrowed his brows in disgust, but he could not show this emotion verbally. Your Highness, please don't worry. Even if I'm not thinking for your Highness, I have to think for the Meng family. Now the Meng family and your Highness are in the same boat. If your Highness is safe, the Meng family can advance further. What's more, Lu Shi's family is still alive and kicking. No matter what, I won't die before him. The hatred of killing his son was absolutely irreconcilable. He wanted to cut off Lu Shi's head with his own hands and use the flesh and blood of Lu Shi's son as a sacrifice to his son Meng Liang's spirit in heaven. In order to achieve this goal, Meng Zhan was betting on Prince Changshu. He could only win, not lose. Sending 400,000 troops to rescue the emperor was indeed tricky, but each of these forces had their own plans, so it was not impossible to defeat them one by one. As long as Prince Changshu listened to his arrangements, he could guarantee that the Dongqing royal family would not survive past this spring. Hearing Meng Zhan's guarantee, Prince Changshu finally felt relieved. On the other side, in the Huangshui barracks, the cold wind whistled, and the flags fluttered. The barracks seemed to be connected, but in fact, they protected each other. The layout was also different. Huang Song had arrived at Huangshui County half a month ago and set up camp. He was Lu Shi's neighbor, and he visited every few days. Seeing Huang Song's attentive manner of visiting, Lu Shi would have thought that he had entered the wrong place if it were not for the fact that he was in the barracks surrounded by soldiers in armor and full of murderous intent. On this day, Huang Song finished training and came to visit again. Lu Shi was holding a hot pot to keep himself warm. When he heard the report from outside the tent, he could not help but let out a long sigh. They saw each other all the time. Since they were all from the same force, he could not refuse Huang Song. Therefore, Lu Shi could only order the soldiers guarding outside the tent. "Let County Chief Huang in." "Did you hear that? County Chief Huang." It was convenient to be an official with a family in the court. Huang Song's grandfather, Huang Tan, was a trusted eunuch by the emperor's side. He secretly helped the emperor sell official titles to earn some pocket money. All the money he earned was for the emperor to squander and enrich his private treasury. Seeing that, Huang Song simply relied on his grandfather's connections and solidified his official position. In just a short time, Huang Song was directly promoted from the district magistrate of Dian district to the county chief of Mauda County. He was young and promising, and he was proud of his success. He originally thought that Huang Song was here to visit, but he did not expect him to have a little tail behind him. Lu Shi sat in the seat of honor in the tent and looked at the young man beside Huang Song with a slight frown. Cheng Jing, Cheng Yumo. A modest gentleman, tall and straight like a pine tree, with a vast and righteous aura. Even though the young man was dressed calmly and simply, he still had a presence that was difficult to ignore when he stood beside Huang Song, as if he was born to be the focus of attention. Looking at Huang Song and then at Cheng Jing, Lu Shi secretly curled his lips. As soon as he saw Cheng Jing, he knew that Huang Song had an ulterior motive for coming that day and would not be easily dismissed. "As expected, Uncle Lu, I've come here today because I have something to discuss with Uncle Lu." Huang Song had the attitude of a junior. He was neither servile nor overbearing, like an ordinary junior next door greeting an elder uncle. Lu Shi frowned and asked, "What is it?" Huang Song quietly glanced at Cheng Jing, who was behind him. Lu Shi understood and gestured for Cheng Jing to speak. "I am Cheng Jing, and I would like to ask a question, Governor." Lu Shi thought for a while and vaguely understood what Cheng Jing wanted to say, but he still wanted to test Cheng Jing's limits. "Ask away." Cheng Jing did not beat around the bush and asked bluntly. "Governor, do you think that this alliance meeting can save the country that is about to collapse?" Lu Shi snorted. He was not angry, but he did not express anything either. He was just beating around the bush. Many forces have gathered at Huangshui, and almost 30% of Dongqing's military strength has been gathered. Can't this save the world? Chapter 684. Lu Shi leaned against the table and smiled. "What you're talking about is indeed a hidden danger, but who would be willing to stand up for it? If they work together, not only will the traitor Prince Changshu tremble in fear, but even the emperor in Qinzhou will not be able to eat and sleep in peace. Moreover, each hero has his own pride, and no one can be completely convinced by another." Huang Song had brought Cheng Jing over to find Lu Shi with two ideas. One was to cooperate with Lu Shi and elect a reputable leader who could control the situation. The other was to make Lu Shi the leader and lead the troops to fight it out with Prince Changshu. If it was the former, Lu Shi wouldn't mind joining in the fun. If it was the latter, he could only lament that the younger generation were all black-hearted. Even an old man had to be black-hearted. Wouldn't the conscience of the younger generation hurt? "You're right, Governor, but if we shelve this matter, the alliance will fall apart sooner or later." As Huang Song's spokesperson, Cheng Jing's words represented Huang Song's opinion. If it was inconvenient for Huang Song to say something, Cheng Jing could help him say it. "My lord intends to propose the election of the alliance leader at the alliance meeting in 2 days. However, my lord is afraid that his own people will speak lightly, and hopes that Governor Lu can say a few words on his behalf." Lu Shi frowned. He wasn't here to instigate him to fight for the leader. He wouldn't mind if it was just a few words from the side. Anyway, he wouldn't lose anything. He could just treat it as a good deed. But, he was a little worried. He didn't know who Huang Song's target for the leader was. If it was Lu Shi himself, he would be in a difficult position as the responder. He would be suspected of being self-directed and boastful. To prevent himself from failing miserably, Lu Shi had to be cautious. He pretended to ask casually, "Does Bogeo have a candidate in mind?" The question was directed at Huang Song, so Qing Jing couldn't answer for him. Fortunately, Huang Song was already prepared. He sat upright at a moderate pace. He said, "Song does have a candidate here. This person is the county chief of Zhe County, Su Bei. What do you think of him, Governor?" Dongqing's territory was divided into 6 states and 21 counties. Each state was divided into 3 counties, and the remaining 3 counties were calculated independently. These 3 commanderies were Hu Commandery, Zhe Commandery, and Hu Commandery. Needless to say, Hu County belonged to the royal family of Dongqing on the surface, but it was secretly in Lu Shi's hands. This was a tacit understanding among others. As for Zhe County, from the previous dynasty until now, this place was equivalent to the headquarters of the Su family, similar to the relationship between the Meng family and Cangzhou. The question was, who was this Su Bei of the Su family? At the mention of this young fellow, others might be a little dumbfounded. However, at the mention of Su Bei's ancestor, there was no one in the 5 countries who did not know of him. She was one of the meritorious deeds of the founding of the great Xia dynasty. She was as famous as the ancestor of the Meng family, Meng Jing. After his death, he was conferred the title of Marquis of Inner Pass and was known as Duke Su. Because the Su family was small in number and kept a low profile, from the previous dynasty until now, there were very few officials, so society paid very little attention to them. However, they valued quality over quantity. They walked the path of elite soldiers. The Su family had few officials, but each one of them could not be ignored. Nominally, the Su family was not one of the 4 noble families of Dongqing, but in terms of overall strength, they were slightly stronger than them. Su Bei was the eldest legitimate grandson of the Marquis of Guanyi, Duke Su. He was of noble birth and had great strength. Recommending this person to be the alliance leader for the rescue of the emperor was the most suitable choice. However, Lu Shi furrowed his brows in deep thought and hesitated. Recommending Su Bei? Huang Song was stunned and asked him, "Governor, do you think this person is not suitable?" Lu Shi waved his hand and laughed. No. I'm not saying that Su Bei is not good. In fact, this child is not bad. He comes from a good family, has strong military strength, and has sufficient prestige. His talent has spread far and wide at a young age. However, Governor Huang seems to have forgotten that other than Su Bei, the Su family has another direct descendant. If we recommend Su Bei and not Su Fei, I'm afraid that these 2 brothers will not be satisfied and cause internal strife. When that happens, it will not be good. The current head of the Su family was Su Bei's grandfather. This old man was old, but his spirit was hale and hearty. He was already 70 years old, but he still had sharp eyes and ears. One look and you could tell that he would live to 100 years old. He had managed to outlive 2 legitimate sons. These 2 legitimate sons each had 1 son. They were the eldest legitimate grandson, Su Bei, and the second legitimate grandson, Su Niu. In terms of the eldest legitimate son, Su Bei was more legitimate. However, the problem was that the old man from the Su family favored his youngest grandson, Su Fei. He had repeatedly expressed in public that he favored his youngest grandson, saying that his youngest grandson, Su Fei, had the elegance of his younger days, tsk. Look at this mess. Because of old grandfather Su's favoritism, the relationship between the 2 legitimate grandsons was strained. The competition was fierce, and there was endless internal strife. To put it bluntly, this was the consequence of not being strict in managing the family and not differentiating between the young and the old. If the family was not stable, how could the world be pacified? From Lu Shi's point of view, no matter which one of them was recommended, they were destined to offend the other. Huang Song was silent. He looked at Lu Shi with an expression that said, "I feel very wronged." Then, "Governor, who do you think is more suitable?" Lu Shi did not speak. Disregarding the two Langjuns from the Su family, the one with the highest status and the most prestige in the alliance was him, Lu Shi. However, this time, he was there to watch the show, not to put on an act. He had no intention of competing. Huang Song and Lu Shi answered one-on-one. Cheng Jing had been secretly observing Lu Shi. The more he observed, the more his brows furrowed. This matter was fruitless. Lu Shi was an old fox who was immersed in the officialdom. He was very slippery. How could he be easily trapped? On the way back, the two of them wore serious expressions, each with their own thoughts. Huang Song muttered, "This Lu prefecture overseer is very guarded." Cheng Jing agreed in his heart. When he directly mentioned Prince Changshuo's conspiracy, Lu Shi's expression did not show the slightest hint of surprise. It was obvious that he was also well aware of it. Lu Shi was well aware of the hidden dangers in the Alliance army, but he did not come out and did not easily communicate with others. He had always put on an aloof appearance and kept his mouth shut like a gourd with its mouth sawed off. This showed Lu Shi's attitude. He would not easily fall into the trap. Leader of the Alliance army, this position is like a burning iron chair. It's not suitable for anyone to sit on it, but someone has to sit on it. As the saying goes, the death of a fellow Taoist is not the death of a poor Taoist. For an old man like Governor Lu who is immersed in the officialdom, how could he not know the truth? It is also expected that he would not fall into the trap. There is no need to be discouraged, my lord. Cheng Jing was not dispirited by this result. Let's go back and discuss it. Huang Song's expression was solemn. If that's the case, then on the day of the alliance meeting, should we still mention the election of the leader? Cheng Jing said, "Of course we should mention it. However, my lord, there is no need to suggest a candidate. Let them fight for it." From Cheng Jing's point of view, some people could not wait to elect the leader. It was just that they were thin-skinned and were unwilling to speak up. If Huang Song were to speak up, he could invisibly win over a good impression. Of course, there were also people who refused to elect the leader. Huang Song would also attract this group of enemies. Chapter 685. Cheng Jing lowered his eyelids in thought, analyzing clearly. If it's not Su Bei, then it's Su Fei. It can't be anyone else. They've brought the most troops, 100,000 elites. They're much better than the loose fishes of the Alliance. If the leader of the Alliance isn't born among them, I'm afraid they won't be satisfied. If they leave in a fit of pique, the Alliance will only exist in name, then we'll fall into the enemy's trap. 400,000 troops from the Alliance sounded majestic, but in reality, half of them were idle people who only knew how to cheer. They were just there to make up the numbers. As for the other half of the elites, the Su brothers made up 60%. If they left, what was the point of rescuing the emperor? Speaking of troops, Huang Song was depressed. Actually, the candidate he favored the most was Lu Shi. Lu Shi was old, had enough prestige, official status, and a good family background. He was definitely more reliable than the two brats from the Su family. However, Lu Shi did not play by the rules. He was the magistrate of Chongzhou, but he only brought 20,000 soldiers with him to rescue the emperor. One had to know that even a young man like Huang Song had brought along 25,000 yuan in assets. Someone asked why Lu Shi brought so few people. Wasn't it embarrassing? Lu Shi smiled and choked the person back. I am the governor of Chongzhou. The safety of the people of Chongzhou is the most important. Chongzhou is a bitterly cold place, bordering the three tribes of the northern borderline. The barbarians of the three tribes eyed the hinterland of Dongqing covetously. If a large number of troops were mobilized to rescue the emperor, the northern borderline would take advantage of the situation and attack the borders of Chongzhou, what would happen? Although rescuing the emperor is important, there are priorities. I think that national defense is the most important, and everything else is secondary. Look, this scene was beautiful. Who would dare to mock Lu Shi for having fewer troops? Huang Song and Qing Jing returned to the tent. Feng Ju was buried in his work. Hearing the commotion, he looked up and saw the two enter one after another. Lord and Yumo are back. What's the news? The two shook their heads. Huang Song said, Lu Shi is too cunning. No wonder he used to be the chief of Hu County. He's not easy to deal with. Feng Ju listened to the two's description and frowned in thought. I'm afraid you've forgotten someone. Confronting Lu Shi head-on was asking for trouble. To drag this old fox into the water, there was no need to confront him directly. Who did you forget? Qing Jing asked. Lu Shi. Feng Ju sneered and spat out the name. Huang Song shook his head like a rattle. This won't do. If I drag Lu Shi down with me, this father and son pair will not forgive me. Feng Ju explained, that's not what I meant. Qing Jing frowned. He seemed to understand Feng Ju's plan. You mean, if the alliance, or the two Langjuns of the Su family can't compete, they can turn around and support Lu Shi? Feng Ju nodded and said, yes, that's exactly what I meant. If Su Bei and Su Fei are unable to compete, it will definitely affect the unity of the alliance army. When the time comes, the morale of the people will falter and Prince Changsha will have his way. Since that was the case, they might as well let Lu Shi become the alliance leader while they were fighting over it. Although Lu Shi was a district magistrate, he was ambitious. All of Wanzhou was probably in his hands. With just Wanzhou, in addition to Chongzhou and Hu County in Lu Shi's hands, what power in Dongqing could go against them? Even if the two Langjuns of the Su family are unwilling, they have no choice but to bow their heads. Huang Song thought about it and agreed that it was a good idea. However, he was a little timid. He shrugged his shoulders and frowned bitterly. I'm afraid that Lu Shi will strangle me. The two of them were fair-weather friends. They hadn't seen each other for many years. After reuniting, they schemed against Lu Shi. He was really afraid that Lu Shi would press him to the ground and beat him up. Feng Ju and Qing Jing looked at Huang Song silently. Their eyes were filled with an unfathomable light. They seemed to sympathize with him, but at the same time, they seemed to be embarrassed. My lord, do you dare to be even more timid? The three of them had planned it well. Everything was ready except for Lu Shi's arrival. They never expected that Lu Shi was indeed Lu Shi's biological son. As the father, he had brought 20,000 troops to protect the emperor. As the son, he was even more shameless. He had brought 10,000 troops to watch the show. Lu Shi and Jiang Pengji had the same idea. Anyway, their son, father, would bring more people. They wouldn't force themselves. Of the 10,000 troops that Jiang Pengji had brought, 6,000 were elites. The remaining 4,000 were new soldiers who had only trained for a few days. Their combat power was mediocre. Jiang Pengji finally brought 10,000 troops and finally arrived at the location of the alliance meeting, Huangshui. The sickly Feng Zhen was frozen like a quail. He clung to the carriage and refused to get out. Yang Si sneered at him. Look at how useless you are. Although he said that, Yang Si's actions were very honest. He didn't want to get out of the carriage and ride a horse. Seeing the two men so timid, Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and mocked them indiscriminately. Look at how useless you are. The weather was nice, but the two of them were still huddled in the carriage and refused to get out. They even had to eat in the carriage. Jiang Pengji couldn't stand it anymore. Yang Si said, I'm old. I'm not as vigorous as young people. Feng Zhen said, I'm already half a foot in the grave. Please take pity on me, my lord. Very well, the two strategists had successfully disgusted Jiang Pengji and driven her away. After Jiang Pengji rode away majestically on Little White, Fengzhen snatched the hot water from Yang Xi's arms. You're fighting with a sick person. Yang Jingrong, you're regressing as you age. Yang Xi wasn't someone who would wait to be captured without putting up a fight. You said you were sick, but now you're full of vigor. Who would believe that you're a sick person? In terms of age, I'm older than you. You have to respect your elders. Then why don't you love the young? Fengzhen was flustered and exasperated. Listening to the commotion coming from the carriage, Jiang Pengji secretly rolled her eyes in annoyance. Why had she asked Fengzhen and Yang Xi to follow the army? The two of them were good individually, but when they were put together, they produced a subtle chemical reaction and kept on making noise. The two of them were almost 60 years old together, but they were still so frivolous. While riding on Little White, she scanned the bullet screen in the live stream room, intending to find some fun in it. The idle audience was still the idle audience. The bullet screen was full of fun. Yi Washenmu, it's so boring. I can only watch the two strategists love and kill each other every day to pass the time. Fake mud doll, #cheeks, Billy already has Yang Xi and Fengzhen's food. You're welcome to try it. Shu Shanyali, you evil cults look at people with rotten eyes. I feel that the two of them are walking further and further down the road of clowns. Kei Sang, that's their personalities. If it were Feng Jin, Wei Ci, or Su Ku, the atmosphere would probably be cold. Lo Siji Lianmeng, are you so idle that you need to play CP to pass the time? Speaking of which, when will we arrive at Huangshui? Gui Kai Guofengxiu, same question. Let's wait while we knock on the bowl. If they didn't arrive at Huangshui, Yang Xi and Fengzhen's public image would collapse. Jiang Pengji looked down at the topographic map. According to the directions on it, there was still half a day's journey to Huangshui. After a while, scouts galloped over on horseback. My lord, there are scouts from unknown forces ahead. Chapter 686. This place was very close to the Huangshui River where the alliance meeting was held, so it was normal to run into scouts. After a round of probing, it was indeed a scout from the allied army. With a guide, Jiang Pengji could avoid many detours. My father has arrived? Both parties identified themselves, and the scouts of the alliance came over to pay their respects to Jiang Pengji. The alliance army scout cupped his fists and bowed. Governor Liu has arrived and is setting up camp on the east side of the alliance army's camp. Does Liu Langjun want to go over? Jiang Pengji smiled. Of course I have to go. Please lead the way. As the scouts passed on the news of Jiang Pengji's arrival spread throughout the allied camp. There was a question that many forces were most concerned about: how many soldiers did Liu Shi bring? The answer was, more than 10,000. Everyone was speechless. Liu Shi had brought 20,000 soldiers and horses, and Liu Shi had brought 10,000. The father and son only had 30,000 in total, which was less than 1/10 of the alliance's total military strength. After all, they were a major force in Dongqing. Why did they bring so few people with them? Didn't they look shabby? They couldn't understand, but two of them breathed a sigh of relief. These two were none other than the two Langjuns of Zhe County's Su family, the brothers Su Bei and Su Fei. Although the two of them were cousins, they had been competing with each other since they were young and had almost fought to the point of becoming cross-eyed. The brotherhood was only about face and affection. There was no lack of discerning people in the alliance army. Many of them could already tell that the alliance army was facing a severe test. Many of them had thoughts of electing a leader. Of course, they wanted to elect a leader not to save Dongqing, much less to save the royal family. They only wanted to seek benefits from it. However, no one had the courage to stand out. After all, the bird that sticks out gets shot. Su Bei and Su Fei both had ulterior motives. Not only did they view each other as a thorn in their side and a competitor, they also had their eyes on the Lu family's father and son. He heaved a sigh of relief when he found out that Lu Shi and Lu Shi had only brought 30,000 soldiers with them. With such a small number of troops, they definitely didn't have the qualifications to be the alliance leader, because they couldn't control the situation. After eliminating a formidable opponent, he only needed to guard against Su Fei, Su Bei. Jiang Pengji had yet to arrive at the camp of the alliance army. Naturally, she did not know what strange thoughts others had in their heads. She happily ran to Lu Shi's campsite. Before she arrived, she was splashed with cold water. What? Father only brought 20,000 soldiers and horses? Jiang Pengji was astonished. Yang Si and Feng Zhen, who were wrapped up like penguins, were also astonished. 20,000 soldiers? What was the use of 20,000 soldiers? Were they going to be food for the enemy? On second thought, his lord was even more unsightly. She had only brought 10,000 soldiers with her. It seemed like this pair of father and son had come here just to be bystanders. When Lu Shi heard the news, he was also shocked. In the end, the father and son looked at each other, speechless. Jiang Pengji had brought very few people with her because the situation in Wanzhou was unstable. She was unable to transfer more people. Lu Shi had brought few men with him because Chongzhou was connected to the north borderline. The three tribes of the north borderline had a hard time this winter, and it would be even harder at the start of spring. If too many of their military forces were taken away, it was feared that the three tribes of the north borderline would not care about their lives and gather their troops to invade the south. Although the possibility was small, they still had to guard against it. Therefore, because of various reasons, the father and son became a member of the soy sauce ball. Although their military strength was superior, they were lacking in manpower. Regarding this, the two of them accepted it. It didn't matter if he could stand out or not. What mattered was that he could achieve his goal. No matter what the outcome of this rescue mission was, it was fine as long as it did not affect the fundamental interests of the father and son. Jiang Pengji had just arrived, so she needed to understand the strength of the alliance. Only after doing his homework would he have a clear idea of what was going on. Lu Shi had arrived earlier than her, so he knew more information. He said, "There are a total of 23 alliance troops this time. Among them, the most eye-catching are the two brothers of the Su family, the descendants of the Marquis of Guanyi, Su Gong. These two brothers are young and promising. They are good at everything except for their lack of experience. Their prestige still relies on the shadow of their ancestors. In this election of the alliance leader, these two will definitely participate in the fight and fight to the death. Although the title of alliance leader is an empty title, it is very important to them. Only by improving their reputation could they attract more talents to join them. Only then could their influence be further developed. Rather than saying that the position of alliance leader was an empty title, it was better to say that it was a living advertisement that would attract countless viewers. Lanting, do you have any thoughts about the position of alliance leader? Lu Shi asked his daughter. Jiang Pengji shook her head decisively. She said straightforwardly, "I'm here to expand my business and see if I can bring a few people back. I have serious matters to attend to, not to play house with a bunch of children." Election of the alliance leader? Childish. They can elect whoever they want. I just have to do my own thing. I really don't care who the alliance leader is. Anyway, it can't be me. With such a small number of troops, she couldn't compete even if she wanted to. She might as well relax and watch the show. Lu Shi's expression froze. Daughter, does your strategist know that you're speaking so bluntly? Yang Si and Feng Zhen sat to the left and right of Jiang Pengji. They looked down and focused, like old monks in meditation. Lu Shi snorted and said, "That's true. No matter how big the ruckus gets, it has nothing to do with us. The election of the alliance leader had nothing to do with them. They were better off watching the drama unfold as bystanders." Jiang Pengji blinked and secretly glanced at the two strategists who were offline. She suddenly said, "Father." Lu Shi was puzzled. "What's the matter?" Jiang Pengji smiled and corrected Lu Shi's faulty wording. "Not father and son, father and daughter." As soon as she said that, Lu Shi was shocked. Yang Si looked as if he couldn't bear to look at it, as if he had seen the end of the world. He raised his hand to his forehead. Feng Zhen's eyes widened in surprise. Then he covered his chest and coughed violently. Damn, he almost choked on his saliva. Lu Shi quickly regained his composure and asked his daughter with his eyes, "Why did you suddenly say that?" Jiang Pengji said, "In my opinion, this alliance meeting is a good opportunity. It can't be dragged on forever." Lu Shi didn't object. He had mentioned to his daughter about recovery, but Jiang Pengji didn't say anything, so he didn't rush her. His daughter obviously had her own ideas. Lu Shi didn't need to interfere. Below, Feng Zhen looked at Lu Shi eagerly, hoping that his lord's words were just a joke. Lu Shi said, "As long as you like it. Back then, I made you dress up as a man and pretend to be your brother. That was because I had no choice. Now that you've grown up and can take responsibility, I'm very relieved. Lanting, what time do you plan to pick so that I can make preparations?" Logically speaking, he still had to make up for his daughter's hairpin. Jiang Pengji said, "We'll see when the time comes. There's no hurry now." His daughter wasn't in a hurry, so naturally, Lu Shi wasn't in a hurry either. However, there were two strategists here who felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. Feng Zhen even had an expression that said, "I can't take it anymore, I need my sister to comfort me." How could his lord be a woman? How could she be a woman? My lord. Even the quick-witted Feng Zhen had times when he was stuttering. His gaze lingered below Jiang Pengji's chin and above her abdomen. "Look, it's flat." Jiang Pengji understood. She glanced at him meaningfully and sneered. "Do you want to verify it with your own hands?" Feng Zhen, the frivolous one, said, "Can I?" "You can. However, I'm afraid that you'll break before you touch it." She glanced at the area 3 inches below Feng Zhen's navel with a faint smile. Feng Zhen felt a chill down his spine. He almost burst into tears. Chapter 687. Yang Si could not help but sigh when he saw Feng Zhen's defeated expression. How could he not know his lord's temperament? He held back his laughter and said, "The truth is already in front of you. Why are you still unwilling to accept your fate?" "I think I can still be saved." Feng Zhen imitated Jiang Pengji's words in the past, like a salted fish. Yang Si couldn't laugh anymore. No matter how he tried to save her, he could not change the fact that his lord was a woman and not a man. "I advise you to accept reality. With Master's temper, she won't tolerate anything. It's too late for you to replace her." Yang Si turned to look at Feng Zhen and reminded him. "You've always been unrestrained and unrestrained. In the past, it was fine. After all, you and I didn't know the Lord's true gender. But now, you can't ignore it. The Lord was raised as a man, but she is not a man after all." If the news that Jiang Pengji was a woman was suddenly revealed, no matter how carefree they were, they could not accept it immediately. This news was too shocking. However, Jiang Pengji had given them a heads-up beforehand and given them enough buffer time, so the impact was not great. Feng Zhen and Yang Si weren't people who liked to get stuck in a dead end. On the contrary, due to their temperaments, these two people were very receptive. It wasn't that they couldn't accept reality, it was just that the truth destroyed their worldview. However, since she was the master that he had chosen, he had to support her to the end even if he had to kneel down. As Feng Zhen listened to Yang Xi's words, he felt that something was amiss. There was more to it than meets the eye. Yang Jingrong, what do you mean? Yang Xi snorted. I don't mean anything else. I just want to remind you to pay attention to your words and actions. Just now, your conversation with the Lord was very inappropriate. Feng Zisher, recall your conversation with the Lord just now. Is it appropriate? If the Lord was a man, it would be fine if you teased him a little. It was harmless, and the world would not criticize you. But now, since you know that she is a woman, you should know to avoid arousing suspicion and pay attention to the rules between men and women. Our Lord is still young and her temperament is uncertain. Don't lead a good seedling astray. Feng Zhen had a shocked expression on his face. He looked at Yang Xi with sympathy in his eyes. We have a responsibility to care for people with cerebral palsy. Feng Zhen looked unconvinced. Yang Jingrong, you're wrongly accusing me. Do you think that a playboy who is familiar with the code words of the brothel, who is good at flirting with prostitutes, who drinks like water, and who hums flirtatious songs can be a decent seedling? It had long grown crooked. Even if I lead him astray, it's my Lord who leads the innocent and pure me astray, not the other way around. In terms of skill level, I'm not even as good as my Lord. It was fine to say that he was unrestrained, but he couldn't just throw the blame to him. His private life was indeed not good, but he was not a person without integrity. Was he the one who instigated the Lord to act like a romantic gentleman? Doesn't the person who said this feel a pang of conscience? Yang Xi snorted coldly. Even the corners of his eyes were filled with obvious doubts. Feng Zhen was filled with anger. He was about the same age as Yang Xi and could be considered to be of the same generation. But now, Yang Xi had grabbed him by the ear and lectured him. Feng Zhen was also angry. Yang Jingrong, do you think you're raising a daughter? With Lord's character, why would she need me to teach her? Yang Xi was about to retort when Feng Zhen quickly said, don't object to it. According to my understanding of my Lord, if you deliberately emphasize the need to keep a distance between men and women, it will only make her unhappy. You're experienced enough to know the taboo of a person in a superior position. Don't break the taboo. To put it bluntly, whether my Lord is a man or a woman, what difference does it make to people like us? Don't be obsessed. He was still a single dog, yet he was acting like a loving father and treating his Lord like a daughter. Was there something wrong with Yang Xi's brain? Actually, Yang Xi just wanted Feng Zhen to rein in his attitude, but this fellow just had to turn the tables on him. Yang Xi wanted to hit someone when he heard this. You're twisting words and forcing logic. He glared at Feng Zhen. Do you think I don't know the taboo that you've mentioned? I'm not asking you to rein in your behavior because I want you to be estranged from my Lord or make her unhappy. I'm only thinking about my Lord's reputation. Do you understand this painstaking effort? You don't care about your reputation. Do you want to tarnish my Lord's reputation after 100 years? How can a ruler not be a ruler and a minister not be a minister? Yang Xi was so angry that his balls hurt. He really wanted to press Feng Zhen into the snow and make this fellow listen to his lecture. Feng Zhen pursed his lips. He really didn't care about her reputation. His Lord was also a pragmatic person who didn't care about empty reputations. Seeing his behavior, Yang Xi was both angry and amused. Did you study for so many years for nothing? Back then, Emperor Taizu of Xia put Duke Su in an important position, and the relationship between the ruler and his minister was deep. It was originally a beautiful story, but look at how those despicable unofficial histories are written. How many unofficial histories of later generations have fabricated stories to slander their romantic relationship? The Su family of Zhe County has been criticized. It's rumored that they have the royal blood of the Xia dynasty running through their veins. Haven't you heard of it? Back then, Emperor Taizu of Xia was a heroic man, and Duke Su was an extraordinary woman, but they were still criticized and slandered by the world. Now, my lord is a woman, and most of her ministers are men. The criticism they receive will only be more severe. If you don't want to add a romantic debt to later generations, then go ahead and do it. It's just that you're a prodigal son. Don't implicate my lord and let her be criticized along with you. If you still don't understand, I won't say any more. Feng Zhen couldn't refute. He and Yang Si were both people who didn't bother about trifles, but they were different. Feng Zhen completely let go of his restraints and didn't care about his image and reputation. Yang Si was the type who was inwardly coquettish and flirted in secret. He was very serious on the surface. Who can control the mouths of the people in the world? Feng Zhen felt a little guilty and lacked confidence. Yang Si replied, I can't control the mouths of the people in the world, but I can control your actions and words. I can keep an eye on you at all times. Feng Zhen was like a frosted eggplant, dispirited and listless. He didn't know that he would be so unlucky to be partnered with Yang Si. If he had known earlier, he would have rather partnered with Feng Jin or Wei Si. At least they were gentle and easy to deal with. Do you think that the others will be very surprised if they know about this? Yang Si said, I don't know if they will be surprised or not, but they will definitely be shocked. His majestic and heroic lord had turned into a delicate woman in a single night. Who could withstand such a huge shock? She threw the task of setting up camp to the two strategists. Jiang Pengji was a hands-off shopkeeper and had nothing to do. She sat opposite Lu Shi and brewed tea and wine. They asked and answered questions to understand the power of the alliance. As the two of them answered more and more, the audience in the streaming room had a general understanding of the power of the alliance meeting. The more they understood, the more disappointed they were. Huang Xiaotian, a man of few words, what a pity. I thought the streamer would be in the limelight this time and become the leader of the alliance. This bullet screen represented the thoughts of the majority of the audience. They had already moved their small stools and sat down to watch the streamer carry the entire scene. What happened in the end? The streamer told them that she was going to take a break midway. She sat in the substitute seat and watched a group of young fresh meats fight fiercely. Chapter 688. Pure and kind Zhang Xinjie, I think it's impossible to be the leader. The chances are very small, infinitely close to zero. Who asked the streamer and her father to have such a tacit understanding that both father and daughter had brought a small number of soldiers? A mere 30,000 troops could only ensure that they had a certain amount of authority in the alliance army and would not be reduced to a mere background. It was difficult to control the entire situation. As for the Su brothers, Su Bei and Su Fei, they were like the Yuan brothers from the Three Kingdoms period. They were the true leaders of the alliance army. If they were really talented and not the kind of mediocre people who switched from arrogance to deference and had eyes but failed to see, the possibility of the host father and son being promoted was very small. It was more realistic to daydream about becoming an alliance leader. After all, this was a place where fists did the talking. The Su brothers were very young and inexperienced, but they held great weight in the alliance. As a fan of streamers, many viewers felt that there was a psychological gap, but reality was reality, and streamers could not go against the heavens and the earth. Honest and loyal Yi Bushio, #smokes, can anyone be the alliance leader? Have you forgotten how big Dongqing's territory is? The host and his son have already occupied 2 states and Hu County, which is similar to a municipality today. They are in the limelight and are feared by others. If they were to fight for the useless chief position, the disadvantages would outweigh the advantages. They might even get themselves killed. What if the Alliance army has ulterior motives and secretly forms a small alliance to attack the host father and son? Right now, they only had 30,000 soldiers and horses in their hands. They were very weak. Hand speed expert Yu Wenzhou, the host's goal isn't to become the leader of the alliance. She's here to recruit talents and promote her business. What's wrong with the alliance leader? It was just an empty title. If it was emperor, it would be worth it for the host to fight for it. There were gains and losses. It was not the best to gain the upper hand and be in the limelight. Little did they know that making a fortune in silence was the way of the king. I prefer to watch a wolf in sheep's clothing. At first, Lu Shi was worried that his daughter would be unhappy, but after talking to her, he realized that she really didn't care about her reputation. The one who has the last laugh is the winner. Jiang Pengji snorted and said calmly, "The process is important, but it's not as important as the result." Lu Shi was very pleased. "It's great that you think that way. I'm relieved." Feng Zhen and Yang Xi's working abilities were commendable. Under their direction, the camp quickly took shape. The first thing to be done was the commander's tent. As soon as she stepped into her new residence, someone came to visit her. It was an old acquaintance. Jiang Pengji looked at Huang Song and asked him in a familiar tone. "Bogart's camp is nearby?" The young man in front of him was a little longer than he remembered. He looked more muscular, and the immaturity on his face had been slowly worn away by time. The visitor was Huang Song, Jiang Pengji's fair-weather friend. They had a good relationship back in Shangjing. "Yeah, I heard that you're here, so I hurriedly asked people to prepare cooked meat and sake. Let's not go home until we're drunk." Jiang Pengji glanced at the young scholar behind Huang Song. She saw that he was secretly frowning, and his expression was slightly displeased. "That's right, it's really a headache to have a lord who won't leave until she's drunk and can't hold her liquor well." Jiang Pengji bluntly exposed Huang Song's lame lie. "Come on, do you think I don't know what you're planning? You knew I was coming, but you just dragged your feet and refused to come. I'm here now because I can't delay any longer, am I right?" Huang Song's face was bitter, but he did not show any embarrassment at being exposed. "Lu Lanting, your mouth is still so harsh, and your words are like knives." Jiang Pengji crossed her arms in front of her chest. "If you don't want me to be harsh, then don't talk like an official in front of me. Tell me the truth." "Alright, the truth is, I felt that your tent hasn't been set up yet, so I didn't want to sit on the ground and eat meat and drink with you. That's why I delayed coming." Huang Song's answer made Qing Jing's frown deepen, and deep wrinkles appeared on his face. "I've told you the truth. You should let me into your tent, right? You're so talkative. Come in." Jiang Pengji glanced at Qing Jing to see his reaction, then welcomed them into the tent. The tent was very simple. There were only mats for people to sit on, and other than that, there were no other decorations. The three of them sat down. Huang Song asked the guards to set up the table and took out the food from the food box. The cooked meat on the plate had been cut into slices. The slices were still steaming, and they did not smell fishy. Jiang Pengji still spoke in a mocking tone. "The alliance troops are stationed at a place with 400,000 people, but we can still eat meat." Huang Song did not understand. He thought that Jiang Pengji was disgusted, and he felt rather ashamed. "I should do my best as a host and entertain Brother Lu. It's a pity that the snow hasn't melted yet, and the livestock are hiding in their nests. There are no other living creatures for me to eat. When spring comes, the prey will be plump, and I'll hunt a few more for Brother Lu." Qing Jing felt the urge to facepalm. It was definitely his illusion that his lord was so silly and adorable. Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh. She knew that Huang Song was trying to be clever, but she did not expose him. "That's not what I meant. Bogeo, don't misunderstand. The alliance troops have 400,000 troops. How much food can they eat every day? I thought that if the army stationed here, they would at least be at the level where all the birds would disappear, even if they didn't eat the ground and the roots. Thanks to you, I can still eat meat. Huang Song was speechless. Brother Lu's words are reasonable, but the meat you're eating now was secretly reared by me. I'm preparing it for a sumptuous meal when I'm hungry. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have wanted to eat it so early. Look at how good I am to you. I even gave you my secret stash. Jiang Pengji and Huang Song were fair-weather friends. They were not close friends, but they were not strangers either. They had no scruples when they talked at the table. As for Qingjing, he ate silently, drank silently, and watched the two old drivers drift and race in silence. It felt like the door to a new world had been opened. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Huang Song picked his teeth as if there was no one else around and asked Jiang Pengji. Brother Lu, I heard that you only brought 10,000 troops with you. Isn't that not enough? Jiang Pengji said indifferently, is 10,000 troops too little? If it's not enough, doesn't my father have 20,000? Huang Song hurriedly waved his hands. There was a hint of probing in his words. I didn't mean that. I'm just thinking about Brother Lu's temperament. He's always liked to join in the fun and be in the limelight. Now, many of Dongqing's heroes and forces have gathered here to prepare for the rescue of the king, kill the rebels, and protect the country. This is a good opportunity to make a name for yourself. Brother Lu, don't you want to play big and be in the limelight? The two were fair-weather friends, but their temperaments were compatible and they were quite familiar with each other. When she asked this question, it was 70% probing mixed with 30% concern. Chapter 689. Huang Song nodded as he listened. He obviously believed Jiang Pengji's words. No matter how much he criticized her in his heart, at least he believed her on the surface. Qingjing, who was beside him, was not so easily fooled. In his opinion, even if Jiang Pengji was not lying, she was not lying. She had conquered Qingde County in half a month. Such swift actions were enough for Qingjing to view her as a great enemy. After saying this, Jiang Pengji asked him a question. Bogeo, are you interested in the position of alliance leader? Brother Lu, don't laugh at me. How am I worthy of being the alliance leader? Huang Song laughed bitterly, his tone self-deprecating. Jiang Pengji said, why do you belittle yourself? You are the chief of a county and have tens of thousands of troops under your command. Why not? Why not? Of course not. If he could be the alliance leader with such little qualifications, who knew how many people would fight for him? Although Huang Song was ambitious, he could see reality and his own strength clearly. He did not have that kind of arrogance that was higher than the sky. He knew it was impossible for him to become the alliance leader, but he could find a way to maximize the benefits. I am ashamed. Brother Lu thinks highly of me, but with my meager strength, I will only be laughed at by the heroes. The two drank and drank. Because Huang Song was a good talker, the atmosphere did not turn cold. As the conversation went deeper, they began to talk about the various factions within the alliance. Jiang Pengji listened carefully. She had heard a lot from Lu Shi and wanted to dig out more information from Huang Song. Huang Song said, other than the Su brothers, I think there are two other families worth paying attention to. Which two? Jiang Pengji asked him. Huang Song said, one is the chief of Shanghai County, Wu Mashang. The other is the military chief of Zhangzhou Dongmen County, Yang Jian. In my opinion, these two are one of the few pure-hearted forces in the alliance that are willing to protect the emperor. The military chief of Shanghai County, Wu Mashang, is second only to the Su brothers. The military chief of Dongmen County, Yang Jian, has no more than 15,000 troops, but from what I know, this is all he has. This shows his sincerity. When Jiang Pengji heard these two names, she seemed to be deep in thought. Wu Ma Shang, just from the name, I know he is a relative of the royal family. Let's not talk about him. Then who is this Yang Jian? More importantly, Yang Jian was from Zhangzhou's East Gate County. Zhangzhou was Prince Changshuo's fief. Huang Song smiled as he explained, the county chief of Hu County, Wu Ma Shang, is indeed from a branch of the royal family. He can be considered a relative. In terms of seniority, he is the uncle of the emperor and Prince Changshuo. As for Dongmen Commandant Yang Jian, he doesn't have any special background, but I like his temperament. This person's temperament was open-minded, and he was heroic and righteous. Although he looked crude and careless, he was actually very meticulous. Zhangzhou was Prince Changshuo's fief. It looked rich on the surface, but in reality, it was a chaotic place. Prince Changshuo used other reasons to cover up the incidents of water bandits robbing and killing the people, pretending to be peaceful. Only Yang Jian's personality was unyielding and unyielding. It was said that he dared to raise his sword at the age of 17 and led his troops, who were good at swimming, to deal with the water bandits. He fought valiantly and often disregarded life and death. Now that he has made a name for himself, he can be considered a hero. Jiang Pengji pinched her chin. From what you've said, Bogeo seems to like Yang Jian a lot. Huang Song said calmly, of course I want to befriend such a heroic figure. It's just that. At this point, Huang Song's expression darkened. He felt slightly ashamed and didn't continue. Even if he didn't say it, the two people in the tent understood what he meant. There was no point in saying it. However, he didn't know that apart from Jiang Pengji and Cheng Jing, there were 150,000 onlookers. These people didn't understand. Blackberry Can, I'm confused. What's next? Huang Tao Can, same question. What's next? Pomelo Can, there's nothing more. This damned eunuch. He pretended to be mysterious halfway through his speech. Annoying, annoying, annoying. Jiang Pengji looked at the bullet screen full of eunuch and there's nothing more. She held back her laughter in pain. Host V, the Alliance is meeting here. They are here to suppress Prince Changshuo, but this Yang Jian is from Zhangzhou. Zhangzhou is Prince Changshuo's fief, so their relationship is more sensitive. If I'm not wrong, Yang Jian should have been declared independent by the Alliance. Huang Song wants to befriend him, but the situation doesn't allow it. If he befriends Yang Jian, it's equivalent to making enemies for himself. Huang Song won't do such a thing. After her explanation, the comments on the screen changed again. Wei Weian, Huang Song is too cowardly. Why worry so much? If he wants to befriend him, then befriend him. Why does he have to avoid arousing suspicion? Susui Lionian, I think Huang Song is right. Yang Jian is isolated by the whole group. If he brazenly befriends him, he'll definitely be ostracized by the whole group. He'll even implicate Yang Jian. This doesn't fit Huang Song's character. There are many ways to express goodwill. Huang Song is a smart man. Offering help in times of need is much better than adding icing on the cake. If there's a war, Yang Jian might be thrown out by the Alliance as cannon fodder. When that happens, Huang Song can lend a helping hand. This is better than befriending him. Hacker Wen Xiang Pian, to the person above, please accept my respect. Hacker Jian Wen Xiang Pian, the type of streamer attracts the type of audience. I feel like the average IQ of the streaming room is getting higher and higher. Jiang Pengji was very composed. After so many years, she had long developed the habit of ignoring the bullet screen and not being affected by it. She comforted Huang Song. Bogeo, don't be disappointed. It's fine if you secretly befriend Yang Jian. There's no need to announce it to the world. Wasn't there a saying that went, showing off your love will lead to a quick death? Huang Song didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who would comfort someone like that? This person's choice of words was still so amusing. It made people laugh and cry. Words that were originally proper, but when they came out of this person's mouth, they always had a strange tint to them. Huang Song said that they wouldn't go home until they were drunk. Jiang Pengji didn't feel bad about it. Anyway, it wasn't her wine. It would be a waste not to drink it. In the end, the tent reeked of alcohol. Huang Song was already paralyzed on the ground like a puddle of mud. His face was burning red, and he was delirious. On the other hand, Jiang Pengji's wine jars were no less than Huang Song's. She still looked sober, but her eyes were shimmering with tears. Huang Song hugged the wine jars in a daze. He stammered, I can, still, drink. Bogeo's alcohol tolerance isn't good. Tell him to drink less in the future. Although the war hasn't started yet, this is still an important military camp. He should remain sober at all times. He shouldn't drink too much to prevent it from affecting his sanity. Jiang Pengji glanced at Qing Jing, whose expression was normal and unchanging. She said in a lazy tone, "Look at how drunk he is. I'll send someone to send him back. What do you think, teacher?" Looking at Qing Jing's stature, Jiang Pengji really doubted that he could successfully drag Huang Song back. Qing Jing bowed with his hands in front of his chest. "Thank you for your kindness, District Magistrate Liu. I thank you on behalf of my lord. Bogeo and I are good friends. You don't have to be so polite." When she finished speaking, she shouted for the soldiers to support Huang Song and send him back to his own tent. She got up and sent Huang Song and Qing Jing out of the tent. She looked at the few figures in the distance and frowned. Chapter 690. Before he even got close, he could smell the strong scent of alcohol on Jiang Pengji. "Why did my lord drink so much?" She said, "Huang Song is here. If I don't accept the wine that was delivered to my doorstep, wouldn't it be a great loss?" Fengzhen nodded and didn't dwell on this topic. He didn't come to listen to his lord talk about how he had taken advantage of her. "My lord, you should quickly go to the drill ground. Han Mei has gotten into an argument with someone." Han Mei? Got into an argument with someone? She knew every word of this sentence, but when put together, she couldn't understand it. Han Mei has such a good temper, why would he get into an argument with someone for no reason? And it even went to the drill ground? Li Yun was known as a little angel. When they heard that he had gotten into an argument, many people's first reaction was that the other party had a nasty mouth and was the one who provoked him first. Although Jiang Pengji wasn't blind, she was still biased towards her own people. Li Yun was the group's favorite. He was equally good-looking as Wei Ci. If Jiang Pengji wasn't biased towards her own people, would she be biased towards outsiders who bullied them? Fengzhen didn't seem to be anxious. Obviously, this matter wasn't serious. This can't be explained in a short time. "My lord, let's talk as we walk." Fengzhen was afraid that Li Yun would be at a disadvantage, so he hurried over to ask for help. His lord's combat ability was off the charts. How could ordinary people fight against her? At that moment, Fengzhen completely forgot that his lord was a girl. When he finally realized it, his expression was a little conflicted. It wasn't that he didn't want to remember his lord's gender, but his lord's actions were too manly. It was too much of an act. Jiang Pengji didn't say much and said, "Lead the way." The camp hadn't been set up yet, and she didn't have a drill ground here. The drill ground that Fengzhen mentioned was in the camp of another power. Along the way, Jiang Pengji saw that the tents were arranged neatly. The soldiers looked imposing and had the aura of a valiant army. She swept her gaze across and frowned slightly. These people are from the south, right? Look at them, they seem to be good swimmers. Feng Zhen was already familiar with Jiang Pengji's observation skills, so he wasn't surprised. My lord is wise. This is the camp of the military chief of Zhangzhou's Dongmen County. These people are all elite soldiers who are proficient in land and water. I heard that this person has 10,000 elites under him, and they are all able to fight in the waves. Once he's in the water, he'll be able to take on 10 opponents at once. When Jiang Pengji heard this, she stopped in her tracks and turned her head to look at Feng Zhen. Don't you know that Yang Jian is being ostracized? Feng Zhen smiled. Becoming enemies is not becoming friends. Outsiders can't find fault with it. Jiang Pengji had some suspicions. Could it be that Feng Zhen had purposely asked Li Yun to scam him? Otherwise, how could it be such a coincidence that they had a conflict with Yang Jian's people? Feng Zhen understood Jiang Pengji's expression and said righteously, My lord, there are very few people in this world who are as open and aboveboard as I am. Why would I deliberately set up a trap to frame others? Even if I had such intentions, I wouldn't have chosen Han Mei. That brat lacked a heart and wasn't suited for this kind of heart-wrenching work. This time, it was truly a coincidence. If my lord doesn't believe me, I have nothing to say. Who would believe it? Jiang Pengji whispered to him. I can't believe everything you say, but I can't ignore it either. Tell me, what are you planning? Feng Zhen shamelessly agreed, not feeling the slightest bit ashamed. My lord is participating in the alliance meeting for business and for talents. Business has yet to materialize, but talents should be put on the agenda. Jiang Pengji said, Then tell me, who have you taken a fancy to? Yang Jian has a centurion under his command. His appearance is a little ugly, a little unique, but his appearance isn't a problem. What's more important is that he's an excellent swimmer. I secretly watched him train his troops and discovered that he has a lot of ideas and is quick-witted. His training methods are different from ordinary people and can't be considered mainstream, plus, his appearance isn't good, so he hasn't been put in an important position. Feng Zhen tucked his hands into his sleeves. He was so cold that he wanted to shiver, but he still held on. Seeing this, Jiang Pengji tossed her hot water bottle to him to warm his hands. You're a man, but you're even more delicate than a young lady. Feng Zhen said, More delicate than a young lady? That depends on who that young lady is. His lord was bold and unrestrained. Was there a man in this world who was more manly than her? After a while, Feng Zhen asked her hesitantly, Would my lord despise someone for being ugly? If she neglected a talent because of his appearance, Feng Zhen was worried that it would incur resentment. Hearing this, Jiang Pengji snorted. Have I ever despised you? Feng Zhen was speechless. Damn, he couldn't go on like this. I'm asking a serious question. If my lord doesn't despise that person's ugly appearance, I'll find him for you. Jiang Pengji also answered seriously, For your lord, those who have limbs, brains, and can work are people. Can being good-looking be used to make a living? As for those who are good-looking but are as mentally retarded as 3-year-olds, they're not even worthy of being a pretty face. Speaking of good-looking, who can be more pleasing to the eye than Zixiao? If you think that person is useful, you can try to get in touch with him. But you have to consider Yang Jian's opinion, lest you become enemies. For her, appearance had never been a plus. Good-looking people were pleasing to the eye, but if they weren't practical, she would reject them. Beauties who couldn't work and weren't as beautiful as Wei Ci were useless vases to her. They even took up space. With Jiang Pengji's affirmation, Feng Zhen calmed down and thought about how to abduct a talent. Jiang Pengji thought of a detail and asked Feng Zhen. Although troop training isn't a secret, not everyone can watch it. How did you sneak into Yang Jian's camp? If she couldn't sneak into Yang Jian's camp, how could she watch him train his troops? How could she discover talents? Feng Zhen casually said, "You know what it means to be a good friend." Jiang Pengji then remembered that Feng Zhen was also from Zhangzhou's Anshan County. Anshan County and Dongmen County bordered each other. Feng Zhen had no boundaries. Every day, he was either drinking in the tavern, gambling in the casino, hugging the courtesans in the brothel, or fooling around with his friends. Therefore, Feng Zhen had a wide variety of friends. It wasn't strange that he had a member of the Jian tribe among them. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Feng Zhen wasn't ashamed of it. Instead, he felt proud. He had friends all over the world. Was he afraid? Jiang Pengji crossed her arms. That's a pity. Just now, Huang Song brought Qing Jing to visit. Qing Jing and Feng Zhen were friends. They got to know each other through Wei Ci. Although they hadn't met, they admired each other's talents and appreciated each other's talents. In more modern terms, they were pen pals. They hadn't met in person yet. Hearing Qing Jing's name, Feng Zhen's expression changed slightly. He said, "He won't run away. There's no hurry to meet him." As they spoke, the two arrived at the drill ground. The edge of the drill ground was surrounded by 3 layers of people. Shouts and shouts could be heard from the crowd, their voices like thunder. "General, defeat him. General is mighty." Chapter 691. Jiang Pengji was about to squeeze in, but Feng Zhen was already one step ahead of her. He laboriously used his small body to clear a path. "My lord is different from others. How can you allow your precious body to clash with a commoner?" Although Feng Zhen was talkative, he took Yang Xi's words to heart. "What precious body? It's just a body made up of flesh and bones. Your lord isn't made of glass. It won't break so easily." Jiang Pengji understood his good intentions, but it was really unnecessary. She was willing to reveal her identity and gender, not to get special treatment. You and Jing Rong should also talk about it. There's no need to be so careful. It's uncomfortable. Just do as usual. Feng Zhen lowered his eyes and agreed, still using his body to shield her from the others. Only then did he have the extra energy to pay attention to the drill ground. There were 2 familiar faces on the drill ground, one was Li Yun, the other was Dian Yen. Jiang Pengji frowned. Why was Dian Yen here? Was this related to Dian Yen? Feng Zhen said, "My lord, you might not believe me when I say this, but they were the ones who tried to poach me first." Jiang Pengji was speechless. Feng Zhen explained the whole story. Dian Yen was a good student who was eager to learn. Ever since he joined Jiang Pengji's loving group, he felt the disparity between him and the others. From martial arts to knowledge, he seemed to be seriously biased towards other subjects. On one hand, he studied humbly, and on the other hand, he did not neglect his martial arts. According to his usual practice, he should have practiced martial arts for 2 hours. However, the drill ground had not been cleaned up yet, so he found a secluded place to practice martial arts. He did not expect to be seen by outsiders. That person was one of Yang Jian's subordinates, and he valued talents as much as his life. He felt that Dian Yen was tall and valiant, and seeing that he was wearing a shabby hemp garment with patches on it, he thought that he was a useless soldier. Naturally, he had the idea of recruiting him. Yang Jian's troops were good at fighting on the water. They weren't bad at fighting on land, but that was still their weakness. If Dian Yen joined, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. He had just expressed his intentions when Li Yun, the honest child, came. When that person saw Li Yun's face, it was as if he had suffered a great shock. Without saying anything further, he started to fight. Cat pancakes? Li Yun knew the severity of the situation. This was where the Alliance army was stationed. If he killed anyone, it might cause trouble for his lord. Angel Han Mei's marksmanship was outstanding. Even Jiang Pengji had to take him seriously. Even if he only defended and did not attack, he could still firmly suppress his opponent. The two of them had different mentalities. Li Yun was as calm as water, without any ripples, while his opponent became more anxious and irritable, full of openings. Li Yun found an opportunity and knocked his opponent's weapon away. He pierced the man's armpit with his long spear and tied his hands behind his back. At that moment, the man's personal guards had also called for reinforcements. The one leading them was none other than the commandant of Dongmen Prefecture, Yang Jian. As soon as he saw Li Yun's face, even Yang Jian, who was already middle-aged, felt a moment of fear. He blurted, "What's your relationship with Xie Qian? Master's old enemy?" Li Yun's heart skipped a beat. He lowered his head and glanced at his opponent, who was unwilling to budge. He pressed the center of gravity of the spear in his hand down and firmly restrained his opponent. "Xie Qian is my master." Yang Jian was a middle-aged man in his 40s. His body was strong and well-built, and his facial features were well-defined. His eyes were clear and bright, as if they were flowing with golden light. One look and you could tell that he was a righteous and awe-inspiring man. He was tall, and when he took a step, his stride was half the size of a normal person's. After listening to Li Yun's explanation, he asked, "You're not biological father and son?" Li Yun pursed his lips, his eyes fixed on Yang Jian. He had heard similar words from his lord's father, Lu Shi. Lu Shi had also said that he was Xie Qian's biological son. "Yun and my master are so similar?" Li Yun was curious. Yang Jian replied, "You and him are practically carved from the same mold. The resemblance is uncanny." It wasn't entirely accurate to say that they were identical. Xie Qian's appearance leaned towards being tough. Even though he was dressed in a scholarly robe, he still exuded the aura of a martial artist. Li Yun's appearance was more like a gentler version of Xie Qian. He was handsome without peer, gentle without losing his masculinity. It was more in line with the aesthetics of ordinary people. "You're familiar with my master?" Li Yun still didn't dare to let go of the man under his control. This fellow was still struggling on his deathbed. The eyes that looked at Li Yun were filled with malice. Li Yun had never met this person before, let alone become enemies. Hence, it was easy for him to guess who this resentment was directed at. "We could be considered friends in the past. We made friends through martial arts. No discord, no concord." Yang Jian laughed heartily, not minding Li Yun's impoliteness in the slightest. "We could be considered friends in the past." In other words, they were now enemies and not friends? It was no wonder that Yang Jian's subordinates drew their weapons and started fighting the moment they saw him. If it wasn't for Li Yun's solid martial arts skills, he might have been severely injured in a single exchange. Yang Jian asked, "How are your parents? You're so young. Are they at ease letting you roam the world?" He couldn't detect any malice. This confused Li Yun. Did Yang Jian think that his parents were his master and his wife? Li Yun replied, "My master is already traveling around Zhongzhou. He said that he had important matters to attend to. His wife passed away during childbirth. She's no longer around." When Yang Jian heard this, his expression turned fearful. A man of steel like him actually revealed the melancholy of a young man. "She's already passed away?" Yang Jian sighed. His expression returned to normal. "Right, I haven't asked for your name. What is it?" "This junior's surname is Li. My given name is Yun. My courtesy name is Han Mei." Yang Jian didn't have any malice. Li Yun also gave him face and didn't embarrass him. "Li Yun?" Yang Jian was surprised. The surname wasn't right. Xie Qian's son didn't have the surname Xie. His gaze fell on the subordinate who was subdued by Li Yun. He felt rather embarrassed. It was one thing to fall in love with a goddess but lose to Xiaofan. But at such an advanced age, he still couldn't beat his son. How embarrassing. This person, he's your subordinate? Li Yun pursed his lips, indicating for Yang Jian to look at the person he had subdued. Yang Jian's face turned red. Coupled with his beautiful beard, if the audience in the streaming room saw him, they might think that he was cosplaying as Second Master Guan. My subordinate has offended you. I apologize on his behalf. When he finished speaking, Yang Jian actually bowed with his hands clasped in front. His attitude was very sincere. Li Yun couldn't care less about the silver spear in his hand. He hurriedly let go and went forward to help the person up. Now that the person was free, he immediately jumped up and wanted to sneak an attack from behind. However, he forgot that Dian Yen was watching him from the side. Dian Yen raised his leg and kicked the person's manhood. The person fell forward and fell flat on his face. Bah! What kind of hero is he to stab someone in the back? Dian Yan's voice was loud and he didn't bother to lower his voice. Yang Jian and the others who heard him blushed and felt even more guilty. Li Yun's expression was displeased. He asked Yang Jian, "Do you know why this person kept sneaking up on me?" Yang Jian's face turned even redder. He was ashamed and embarrassed. He was a little embarrassed and embarrassed. He lowered his voice and explained, "He admired your mother's talent and fell in love with her at first sight. He didn't expect that your mother and father had already been married for a few months and that she was pregnant. Of course, he couldn't express his love rashly. In the end, his courtship failed and he was beaten up by your father. He didn't get what he wanted and was beaten up. It hurt his pride. After so many years, he still can't get over it. His shattered little heart couldn't be glued back together." Chapter 692. Was he a love rival who had been beaten by Master? Even so, this person wouldn't want to kill him the moment he saw him, right? Jiang Pengji could not understand it either. It was a godly theory. There are so many idiots in this world who have been rejected by the fair, rich, and beautiful girls. It can't be that every single one of them wants to kill the son of a tall, rich, and handsome man, right? Little angel Li Yun was innocent. The storyteller, Fengzhen, looked at his master resentfully. Don't speak bird language that normal mortals can't understand. Jiang Pengji coughed softly and said, "If that's the case, there won't be a need to fight, right?" Fengzhen continued, "That is indeed the case." However, there were other arguments after that. That person actually started a rumor and slandered Han Mei's mother and father. Han Mei couldn't take it anymore and beat him up. Even though he was injured, he was still stubborn and didn't hold back his words. Han Mei was furious and wanted to make a move. Yang Jian had many people on his side. How could he just sit back and watch? He opened the gates. Slander? What kind of slander could make Li Yun, who had always been calm, lose his rationality and hurt someone? Fengzhen said, "That person spread the rumor that Xiaofan was not a man. He actually pushed his wife to another man for the benefit of his family." Jiang Pengji asked, "What's going on?" Back then, Lu Shi had told her the story of Xiaofan and Wang Huiyun. The husband and wife were a talented man and a beautiful woman. They were a match made in heaven. In layman's terms, this couple's public display of affection was so deranged that it made people want to raise a torch and burn them to ashes. Such a loving couple, how could there be a melodramatic plot where the man pushed the woman to another man? Moreover, Lu Shi had also said that Wang Huiyun had been replaced by someone else after giving birth to Li Yun. In other words, the Wang Huiyun after Li Yun's birth was just an impostor. Fengzhen sighed, using words to reconstruct the scene. Yang Jian had originally wanted to be the peacemaker and cover up this incident. Little did he know that Xiaofan's wife's admirer wouldn't let it go. He had been taught a lesson by Li Yun, and his mouth was still stiff. He said unwillingly, "Where is that coward Xie Qian?" Li Yun was deeply in love with his master, Xie Qianru. Others could slander Li Yun, but they could never slander Xie Qianru. "Say that again? Be careful or I'll cut off your tongue. My master is a dignified man with an indomitable spirit. How could he be a coward?" The other party mocked, "How are you not a coward?" Yang Jian's eyebrows twitched. He hurriedly ordered the retainers behind him to retreat 20 paces. If Xie Qian wasn't a coward, why would he sell his wife for wealth? Li Yun's eyes widened in anger as he clenched the silver spear in his hand. Due to excessive force, his knuckles turned from white to blue. My master loved his wife deeply. Ever since she died in childbirth, he has never remarried. Not only that, they have to offer them fragrant fruits every day, and they have to abstain from eating for 3 days before and after the Memorial Day. The two of them are deeply in love with each other, and can be regarded as role models. You despicable person, don't slander their innocence. Li Yun had an expression that said, "If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll stab you to death with my spear." The other party didn't back down and continued to mock him. Deep love? Died from dystocia? What a joke. More than 10 years ago, I met her by chance. She was alive and well. She told me that it was Xie Qian who had sold his wife for glory and forced her to give herself to another man. How could he do such an animal thing? You call him a man? Tell me, where is Xie Qian? Ask him to come out and confront me. Li Yun was stunned. The other party spoke with such conviction that it didn't seem like he was lying. However, he still defended his master. The little princess liked to defend him without thinking. If you don't like it, then fight. Ridiculous, my master is from the Xie family of Jiangning. Why would he need to sell his wife for glory? He didn't know Xie Qian's background. After all, his master didn't tell him about such a noble background. However, when they were in Xiangyang district, Lu Shi had mentioned it before, and Li Yun had always remembered it. The other party couldn't help but choke on his words. He almost couldn't respond. After a while, he said, "So what if he's from the Xie family of Jiangning? Wouldn't the Xie family of Jiangning be scum who would sell his wife for glory?" Yang Jian couldn't help but facepalm. Of course, the Xie family of Jiangning wouldn't be scum who would sell his wife for glory. In layman's terms, they were the second most powerful of the 4 noble families in Dongqing. Most of their clansmen were versed in both literature and martial arts. Xie Qian was the young leader of his generation. His status was high, and he even dared to look down on the emperor. Whether it was the emperor or Prince Changshu, who could make Xie Qian abandon his beloved wife and his dignity as a man to push his wife to another man? Moreover, when his subordinate met Wang Huiyun, news of Xie Qian's death had already been heard for 3 to 4 years. There was something fishy about this. Yang Jian had admonished this subordinate more than once, but this person just wouldn't turn back until he hit the wall. When his stubbornness flared up, he couldn't be stopped. You're simply being unreasonable. If you slander my master again, I'll make sure your blood splatters 3 feet high. Li Yun was so angry that his cheeks turned red. His eyes were bloodshot, and his anger level was about to explode. Humph, do you think I'm afraid of you? Even if Xie Qian came, I'd spit on him to death, let alone a young brat like you. Thus, this foul-mouthed person was taught a lesson by Li Yun. He pierced his left arm with a spear, creating a bloody hole. He wasn't crippled, but now that the alliance meeting was imminent, where would he find the time to let him recuperate? Li Yun's actions had indirectly caused the death of one of Yang Jian's generals. Yang Jian didn't say anything, but his subordinates weren't willing. Even if they weren't willing, Dian Yan wouldn't let Li Yun suffer. Thus, as the commotion continued, the commotion reached the drill ground. Honest and loyal Yi Buxiu, hey, 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 it's a one-on-one match between father and son. Whoever loses will call him father. Eloquent Jozakai, streamer, do you want to give it a try? You can have 8 or 10 sons for free. Jiang Pengji rarely challenged one person to a one-on-one match. Usually, it was a group of people attacking her, while she challenged a group of people. Seeing the audience in the streaming room egging her to challenge someone, she couldn't help but laugh. Streamer V, a match between father and son? If I had such a weak son, I'd be the first to kill my son's father. It'd be a waste of my genes. As soon as she posted the bullet screen, countless people followed suit. Dongguan Chao Dao Pao, this is the highest level of disdain I've ever heard. In the future, if anyone wants to dump the current one, just tell them directly, I don't despise you for having little money, no house, no job, no savings. It's just that your genes are weak. I'm afraid it'll affect the quality of my offspring. The streamer's words are still so vicious and unkind, but I like this type. Beautiful goddess, hee, can I ask the streamer for one of your eggs to modify my offspring? I promise I'll only do it and not touch it. Lazy Catling, sure, if you're not afraid that the streamer's knee will break your pelvic bone, just ask. Luo Peanut Candy, ha, it's not just a pelvic bone, it's obviously a knee that breaks from the pelvic bone to the skull. It had to be said that Jiang Pengji's words were unkind. Her frequent audience members were also sharp-tongued. When the forest was big, there were all kinds of birds. When the streaming room was big, there were all kinds of scum. Jiang Pengji never read those dirty words. Occasionally, there were some discordant comments, but they were instantly drowned by the idle audience's bullet screen. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.